They were two gifted doctors working on a cure for cancer.
He had sterling academics and was having a successful career in his chosen field.
She chose to be an oncologist because several family members were touched by cancer.
But a mysterious illness would bring their collaboration to a sudden end.
He was going into kidney failure. Several of his organs were starting to fail.
This was a medical mystery. They were testing for everything under the sun.
The subsequent investigation would expose a chilling cause and a love triangle gone wrong.
This was a case about jealousy and fatal attraction gone awry.
This wasn't just a woman scorned, this was a woman scorched.
January 27th, 2013, Houston, Texas. It's nearly midnight when a man is brought into the emergency room of the MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas.
This is a world-renowned cancer hospital. They don't have a lot of walk-ins at their emergency room.
He wasn't making a whole lot of sense. He was in an altered state of mind.
The ER physicians are having a difficult time figuring out who he is and what's wrong with him. Luckily, two women that appeared shortly after he arrived helped.
One of them was his longtime living girlfriend, Yvette Tony, and the other was his research partner, Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo.
The two women identify him as Dr. George Blumenshine, a member of staff at the University Center.
Turns out he's a very prominent cancer researcher at this hospital, at MD Anderson.
The doctors immediately admitted him to run a series of tests to figure out what was wrong.
They thought maybe he was having a stroke. They did various neurological tests.
The tests are all negative. Meanwhile, Dr. Blumenshine's condition continues to worsen.
The lab work showed an unusual high level of acid in his blood, which was causing kidney damage. He was immediately transferred to intensive care.
He was going into kidney failure. Several of his organs were starting to fail, so he was in grave condition.
They're just trying to sort out exactly what's going on and don't really have a clue.
By the time the mystery is solved, it will no longer be just a medical problem, but a matter for police as well. "48-year-old George Blumenshine had been following in his family's footsteps when he first entered the medical profession.
He comes from a family where his father was a renowned doctor himself, who known the world over. So he kind of grew up around high-profile doctor community.
Got his BA from Vanderbilt. He got his medical degree from University of Texas Medical School here in Houston, and ended up going into cancer research and studied cancers of the neck and the throat.
After medical school, George decided to stay in Houston to pursue his career.
For the type of research George was doing, he could not have picked a better place. The Texas Medical Center complex is the largest of its kind in the world.
MD Anderson is a premier cancer institution. It is a hospital and teaching center that really is focused on ending cancer. It is a place where people come from all over the world to be treated because they have the cutting edge, and it gives you the best chance at life.
But professional success wasn't the only thing he found there. In 2003, George fell in love with a fellow doctor named Yvette Tony.
Dr. Yvette Tony was an epidemiologist. She's a highly educated person herself, just a different side of the medical field.
They had a lot in common. She was just as brilliant and accomplished as he was. So they hit it off really well. They seemed to grow even closer over the years. 2007 was an important year for them. Yvette landed her dream job with a pharmaceutical company, and they decided to move in together.
Although they were never married, in 2012, George and Yvette made a different life decision.
They wanted to take the next step, and that next step for them was to try to have a child.
Normally, there would be nothing wrong with that, but Yvette did face challenges getting pregnant.
They were both in their late 40s, so it was a little late to have a child. So, they tried to use IVF.
There's, various procedures that Yvette had to go through in their quest to have a child.
Their persistence seemed to pay off. In May of 2012, Yvette learned she was pregnant with twins, but it would end in heartbreak.
Yvette Tony suffered a miscarriage. And when that happened, that was devastating for both Dr. Blumenshine and Yvette Tony.
They were still trying to recover from that loss. It's a very difficult thing for any couple to get over.
Now, just 4 months later, George has been admitted to intensive care, and the couple is dealing with another life-threatening medical emergency.
Dr. George Blumenshine was taken to the emergency center in the late evening. He was in critical condition.
Once your kidneys go, things start shutting down pretty fast. And they realize that he is probably going to die. So they put him on dialysis.
They could not figure out what was wrong with Dr. Blumenshine until it was almost too late.
The next day, there is finally a breakthrough.
A nurse was changing his urine bag when she noticed that there was this white sediment in the urine. So she sent it over to a kidney specialist for testing.
He took it to his lab and put a sample under the microscope, and he realized, he could see crystals. And he was amazed because he knew what that meant.
Coming up, a mysterious illness becomes a criminal investigation.
It just didn't make any sense. Because either he drank it himself or was poisoned, which is just too far-fetched to believe.
Dr. George Blumenshine, a 48-year-old cancer researcher, has been admitted to intensive care after his kidneys mysteriously began shutting down. And after a battery of tests, doctors have isolated the cause.
It wasn't until the nephrologist, the kidney doctor, looked under the microscope and saw these calcium oxalate crystals and thought, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. He has been poisoned. Because there are not really very many things that can cause calcium oxalate crystals in the urine. It's a telltale sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, which is consistent with his other symptoms. Those symptoms include intoxication, stomach pain, and kidney failure. You can die from ingesting even a small amount.
And it just didn't make any sense. Because this is basically antifreeze. An adult doesn't drink it, much less, a world-renowned doctor.
The hospital immediately notifies police. Investigator Max Sosa is assigned to the case.
I made my way over to intensive care where he was located. He wasn't able to be responsive to any type of questioning. It was just his physical condition.
What normally kills somebody in ethylene glycol poisoning is not just the kidney failure, but it is the metabolic derangements that occur. Death can occur from a life-threatening heart rhythm and arrhythmia.
Because of the circumstances of not knowing what we had, it was real touch and go.
With George out of commission, the next step is to talk to those closest to him.
The detective begins with George's longtime girlfriend, Yvette Tony.
Since it looked like a poisoning case, the authorities wanted to know what he had eaten and what he had drank.
When I initially met Yvette Tony, she was very nice. She appeared to be forthcoming. We tried to get a time frame of when they had eaten together.
Yvette says she has no idea how he could have been poisoned. They'd shared a meal just the night before, when George returned from a medical conference.
They had gotten takeout from a well-known Greek restaurant here in Houston, drank a bottle of wine, and went to bed. Everything seemed fine.
She showed no symptoms that were anything similar to what George Blumenshine was experiencing. So That led me to believe that I could possibly rule out anything that they had consumed or drank together.
That morning, George had left for work, even though it was a weekend.
He got up, drank a glass of orange juice, and then went out the door to go work with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
They had been working together long hours on a project, a research paper.
There was no signs that there was anything wrong with him. There was no slurring of his speech. Nothing was wrong with his gait. He just appeared to be normal.
But Yvette says that when she called George later that day, something didn't seem right.
She said that the first time that she spoke with him, it was somewhere around noon, 1 o'clock, and he was complaining of his head hurting. The second time that she talked to him, she indicated that she could already hear a slur in his speech at that point. She was concerned that he was displaying symptoms of possibly having a stroke.
Some time goes by and she still hasn't heard from him, so she starts to get worried. She tried calling him several times in the next few hours, but he never picked up.
Yvette tells police that George was scheduled to have a dinner meeting that night with several other physicians, including Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo. So around 10 p.m., she finally tried contacting Ana at home.
Yvette was able to reach Dr. Gonzalez Angulo on her phone and ask what the heck was going on. And Dr. Gonzalez Angulo said, I think it's fine. George is acting weird, though.
Yvette Tony, she's asking what condition he's in and why hasn't he gone to the doctor yet. Dr. Gonzalez Angulo's response was that George was uncontrollable. She wasn't able to convince him to go to the doctor.
Yvette tells Dr. Gonzalez Angulo, stay there, I'm coming to get him, and I'll take him to the hospital.
But Yvette says that by the time she arrived at Anna's home, George had already left.
George was driving himself to the hospital. The reaction that Yvette Tony had at that point was she just couldn't understand how Dr. Gonzalez Angulo allowed him to drive his vehicle in the condition that he was in.
Apparently, he just took the keys and left. There wasn't much she could do to stop him. So Anna and Yvette both drive over to MD Anderson, where they find George sitting on a bench.
He basically had driven himself to the parking garage where he normally parked. They were trying to urge him to get to the hospital, and he was reluctant. His speech was slurred. He was incoherent.
To convince George he needed help, Yvette recorded him slurring on her phone while she and Anna talked to him.
He's trying to act normal, like nothing's wrong, and he just looks like a drone. She takes it for, her own edification to show him later, this is why I made you go.
Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself?
The last 8 hours or so, I've gotten progressively discoordinated.
His speech, his reaction, his movements, it all appeared that he wasn't understanding at all what was going on. They actually had to call emergency center personnel to come and get him.
George, Josiah, how you doing, Jim? How are you? I'm fine. You're fine. You're feeling sure. Yeah, let's go hydrate you then.
More than 8 hours after his symptoms first appeared, George was finally admitted to the ER. But was it already too late?
What was difficult in not being able to talk to the victim was he was the one who knew who he was in contact with, what he had eaten, what he had drank. Without any of that information available to us, it was a delay in leading us to where we needed to go.
Maybe it was a patient that was upset and going after doctors at MD Anderson, somebody that didn't get cured and was going to die anyway. It was just such an unbelievable crime to poison somebody with, such a coarse substance.
Coming up, hospital rumors lead to a surprising new suspect.
It seemed to be the worst kept secret at the hospital.
It has been several hours since Dr. George Blumenschein was diagnosed with severe chemical poisoning, and investigators are trying to determine who could have done it.
The actual chemical that was used was ethylene glycol. That's commonly known to be used in antifreeze. However, it was used in its pure form, and that is commonly used in laboratories.
It seemed very unlikely that an experienced doctor would accidentally ingest it. And it just so happens that Dr. Blumenshine didn't even work in a lab.
Did that mean the suspect might be working at the hospital?
We looked at the possibility of someone eliminating somebody just so they could take credit for the research.
We looked into every possibility, but every possibility was not a probability.
Meanwhile, George continues to fight for his life.
He was so sick, he was near death.
The investigation has only just begun when it hits an unexpected roadblock. George's girlfriend, Yvette Tony, has been helpful to detectives so far, but now she suddenly seems to have a change of heart.
She indicated that she was going to have to confer with an attorney. It was surprising because that was going to hinder our process in the investigation. Was she being protective or was she trying to hide something?
Yvette Tony was absolutely a suspect. We did not rule out or rule in anyone until we had all the facts.
And when police try to interview George's research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo, they find her equally evasive.
When trying to even make contact, even in a phone call, it was very difficult. It took several days before I was able to arrange a meeting with her.
Could both women have something to hide? Hoping to find answers, detectives turn to George's colleagues, and what they learn is surprising.
The other doctors say that he's a well-respected member of the faculty. They have no idea who will want to harm him, but he does have a secret.
This was a guy who was having an affair, who had kept it from his long-term live-in girlfriend with whom he was trying to have a child, who was engaged in a relationship with Dr. Gonzalez.
At age 41, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo had come a long way from her humble beginnings.
Dr. Gonzalez was born and grew up in Popayan, Colombia. Her parents had 3 children. They grew up on a ranch, producers of coffee and fruit and cattle. So it was a hardworking family.
Like George, she decided to go into medicine because of her family members.
She chose specifically to be an oncologist because several family members were touched by cancer.
After medical school in Colombia and a residency in Florida, Anna landed at MD Anderson in 2003. She quickly rose to be one of the hospital's shining stars.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo was world-renowned for her cancer research. She had patients. She had saved their lives. They loved her.
It was very evident to me personally that she took care in my well-being. We were going to cure cancer, my cancer. What distinguishes her from being a good physician to a great physician is that you know that you're in good hands.
She and George met shortly after she arrived to the hospital. It seemed like a good partnership.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo and Dr. Blumenshine both had an incredible passion to search for cures for cancer. That certainly brought them closer together in both their research and in their personal lives.
By 2013, the two colleagues were spending most of their time together, in and out of the lab.
They went on trips together, on speaking engagements or conventions.
They went to remote places, I want to say Vietnam to Ecuador. And in fact, not long before this all transpired, they were in Colombia on business.
These people were working at least 60 hours a week, sometimes a lot more. It seems like it would have been easy to, blur the lines between, professional boundaries and the more personal boundaries.
Rumor was, that's exactly what happened.
The suggestion was made by several doctors that there was more than just friendship going on.
There was an incident where a colleague walked in and she was sitting on his lap in his office. It emerged that she was really flirty with him a lot of the time.
Dr. Blumenstein would call Dr. Gonzalez Angulo his little princess. They had pet names for each other. You know, it was definitely a two-way street when it came to romantic mingling.
The possibility of an affair might explain Anna's reluctance to talk to police, and it raises even more questions about George's girlfriend.
Did Yvette Tony know that he was cheating on her? Was she angry about that?
Most crimes either happen because of sex or money, and if money wasn't an issue, they were about to start looking for sex.
We had to take into consideration that this could have been a scorned lover because of the apparent love triangle that we had going on.
Coming up, details of the affair threaten to turn the investigation upside down.
He makes this sort of hospital bed confession.
As George Blumenstein continues to fight for his life at MD Anderson Hospital, detectives have just learned that their victim has been living a double life for 2 years. But is George's affair with his research partner the reason why he was poisoned?
What finally emerged was this really twisty tale of a doctor who was cheating on his girlfriend with another doctor. The police went through that and said, you know, maybe it's Yvette Tony. Maybe she has found out about the affair.
The more the investigators spoke to George's colleagues, the more it seemed like the worst kept secret in the hospital.
Yvette has gotten a lawyer and stopped talking to police. But a few days later, detectives finally get a chance to sit down with the other woman in this alleged love triangle, Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo.
We had a lengthy interview. I asked her about her schedule, his schedule. I asked her about them eating or drinking anything while they were together, and what his mannerisms were when she was with him for that day. She didn't provide anything that was damaging to her other than the fact that she provided him coffee to drink.
He didn't start displaying any symptoms until the afternoon, and by the evening, he was so intoxicated that his colleagues thought he was having a stroke. When they get around to asking her about the affair, she completely denies it.
She was forthcoming about the amount of time that they spent together. She told me that they were very close friends. I asked if there was more, and she just referred to themselves as very close friends.
Although Anna claims there was no affair, she's well aware of the rumors. She tells investigators that her partnership with George has caused her serious problems.
She described threatening letters, there were threatening phone calls. They all had the common thread of stay away from Dr. Blumenstein, you're too close to him, stay away.
She even indicated that there was a point where she had gone out to check her mail, and she was taken to the ground and punched and kicked. When the assault occurred, she called George Blumenstein, and he and Yvette Tony both offered a place for her to stay. They supposedly urged her to go to the police, and she put it off for a time.
The police report appears to confirm the attack.
I was provided with photos of what appeared to be bruising to her face and her abdomen. She described a man and a woman, both African American.
After he was poisoned, those threats and those letters suddenly became Exhibit A.
This all seems to point at Yvette as a potential suspect. If she thought that there was an affair, she might be trying to get back at them.
Investigators are only left with more questions, but thankfully, they're about to get some of them answered.
They got word from the ICU that George was going to pull through. There was kidney damage, but he's going to survive. He doesn't say much while he's recovering in the hospital, but the detectives were able to talk to him after he was released a few weeks later.
It occurred to me that interviewing him at his home or at his office wasn't the ideal or most comfortable place to speak with him. So I convinced him to take a ride with me in my police vehicle. It's an unmarked vehicle, just something that he would have been comfortable in. So we went for a drive and we had a lengthy conversation. He finally provided me a definite timeline, came clean with his affair that had been going on with Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo. The fact that Yvette Tony had no idea that anything was going on between them.
According to George, the affair had been Anna's idea.
Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo was the one that pursued him. She was the one that reached out to him. She was the one that suggested that they work on research together, that they travel to conventions together.
And then things started getting a lot less professional.
At first, George tried to keep their relationship professional. After all, he had a live-in girlfriend. But after constant temptation, he finally gave in.
In 2011, Dr. Blumenshine and Dr. Gonzalez Angulo began their affair. They were at a conference in Sweden together, and that's when they first started their sexual relationship.
George tells detectives that he regrets his infidelity and has already told Yvette about it.
Dr. Blumenshine was absolutely remorseful for his actions, and he owned them.
He makes this sort of hospital bed confession to his girlfriend and says, I need to tell you that I'm having an affair. And it's with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
When investigators asked Yvette about it later, she admitted to having turned a blind eye to it. Even if Yvette knew about the affair, George insists that she would have never tried to poison him. There would have only been one person who would have tried to do that.
Coming up, a jealous lover carries out her deadly plan.
Dr. Blumenshine said that the coffee was incredibly sweet.
Months after the near-fatal poisoning of Dr. George Blumenshine, investigators believe they have a solid suspect. His research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo.
This case had more twists and turns than a Rubik's Cube. To put it all together was not easy, but when you finally got it, it was crystal clear.
So they've been looking at Yvette because they thought that she was jealous of Anna. But George thinks it was the other way around.
George says his suspicions first began when he confided in Anna about the tragedy of Yvette's miscarriage.
Her reaction was, well, I can have a baby for you. That was her first offer when he provided her that information.
She had told him that she could have the child in Colombia and come back and he could be the uncle.
It's amazing to think that she would possibly just try to be a surrogate for them. What a friend.
George declined the offer. Soon after, Anna began telling him that she was getting threats about their relationship.
Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo informed George Blumenshine that she started receiving letters and phone calls suggesting that she stay away from George.
It was pretty clear to me what she was doing is she was threatening and harassing herself to try to drive a wedge between Dr. Blumenshine and Yvette.
That strategy hadn't worked. But how much further had Anna been willing to go?
George is convinced that Anna is the one that poisoned him because of the way his illness progressed over the course of the day.
George Blumenshine described January 27th as being a day where he woke up in the early morning hours, and the point on his agenda was to go over to Ana Maria Gonzalez's townhome, pick her up, and they would both go to the office to do research.
George says Anna had something else in mind.
She apparently pulled him into the bedroom where they engaged in sexual activity. Afterwards, they had breakfast, and Anna gave him a cup of coffee that tasted unusually sweet.
Being a person that he spent hours with, she knew exactly how he took his coffee. He drank his coffee black, unsweetened.
He takes a few sips and says, I can't drink it, it's too sweet. And she keeps forcing it on him. Drink this coffee, it's from my homeland, it's from my homeland.
She told him how special that coffee was. He could never have imagined how special it was indeed.
Ethylene glycol, by nature, is very, very sweet. It is an age-old poison that individuals have used to harm others.
This strange tale of the special coffee that's extremely sweet is surely, to us, was clear that that was the moment that he was poisoned.
Based on George's testimony, it didn't really seem like there was any other explanation.
I went back and I asked him about the wine that he had drank with Yvette Tony just to rule it out. I asked him if there was any distinct sweetness to the wine. And he said no, that there wasn't. So the only thing at that point that he had consumed from the previous night to that morning was the coffee. And that was the only thing that he consumed that would have had the sweetness that ethylene glycol would have produced.
Detectives theorize that when it finally became clear George would never leave his girlfriend, Anna snapped.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo knew she was losing Dr. Blumenshine. There's no doubt in my mind the affair meant way more to her than it did to him.
She wanted to have a child with him. She wanted to be with him. He was living with another woman, and I think sort of stringing her along.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo wanted to kill Dr. Blumenshine because if she couldn't have him, she didn't want anyone to have him.
Now, they just have to find a way to prove it.
We were waiting for a detailed report from the chemist. We had to establish timelines of how what he ingested would have metabolized and what the time frame would have been.
We got with the experts, and when we looked at the timeline, there was only one thing that was off. It was that coffee, and the timeline fit like a glove.
The amount of time that ethylene glycol takes to metabolize in the body, that would have ruled out Yvette Tony because of the time frame where he started exhibiting the symptoms.
He would have been well into metabolic acidosis and renal failure by the time that he had presented to the hospital. So the timeline does not fit at all that Yvette was the poisoner, not to mention the fact that she would have not had access to ethylene glycol from a laboratory.
On May 29, 2013, 4 months after George was poisoned, Anna is arrested on her way to work.
I told her that she was under arrest for the aggravated assault by means of poisoning of Dr. George Blumenshine. She said that I had it all wrong, and my response to her at that point was, "You can't beat science." And she dropped her head, and I believe she responded, "No, you can't."
Coming up, the jury hears new evidence, captured by the victim himself.
Some of those recordings were chilling.
On September 15, 2014, the trial of 43-year-old Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo gets underway. She stands accused of poisoning her lover, Dr. George Blumenshine.
This wasn't just a woman scorned, this was a woman scorched. She was looking for vengeance.
If convicted, Anna could face up to life in prison.
George's credibility definitely came into question during trial. You know, here's a man who wants to play the victim.
Are you proud of what you did with the defendant without...
No, I regret it deeply.
Whether the jury liked him or did not like him wasn't the issue. The issue was you had a man, a doctor, whose maybe only fault was not being faithful to his longtime girlfriend.
Despite her conflicting emotions, Yvette provides the prosecution with compelling testimony.
I trusted her. I trusted him. I felt stupid. I felt betrayed.
Yvette Tony provided the antidote to the jury for their hatred of Dr. Blumenshine. She would never harm this man. You could look at her and see. And she told the jury she felt like a fool for not realizing that this was going on. Yvette Tony was credible and crucial.
I kept thinking to myself, you're going to make me look like a complete idiot. No one said anything to me about this.
She stated that after George confessed about the affair, he also shared his suspicions about Anna.
George said, Yvette, do not poke the dragon. I think she poisoned me, and I don't want to say anything until I know for certain or we have some sort of proof.
They think, well, we're going to just sort of PI this stuff ourselves, be our own personal private investigators. So they start calling and getting her on the line to try to admit that she's done something wrong.
It turned out George recorded those phone calls, and they're now played for the jury in court.
Why in Christ will I ever hurt you? Why?
Why would Yvette hurt me?
I don't know. I don't know you two. I don't know what's behind you two.
On the tapes, Anna tried to shift the blame to Yvette, just as she had done with the police.
If I tell you that I have enough circumstantial evidence to press charges, will you believe me?
No.
I do.
Against Yvette?
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo could never provide the evidence and the supporting documentation to the claims that she made.
According to the state, Anna had fabricated everything, including the claim that she was beaten.
When we started looking, and we looked at all the details and everything, it didn't match up.
The colors of the bruising didn't match. It didn't fit. That the strikes to the face occurred at the same time strikes to the abdomen did.
She beat herself up. That is what she did. It's sad, but it's true.
Prosecutors argue that the toxicology report proved that Anna was the only one that could have poisoned George.
We had a mountain of evidence against Dr. Gonzalez Angulo. And we had the best kind of evidence. We had science.
The science proved that he was poisoned with ethylene glycol, and it was done at a time when this coffee was administered to him.
The defense doesn't agree. They argue that the science is anything but conclusive.
There was evidence presented during trial that the ingestion of any harming substance could have occurred even the day before or the days before when Dr. Blumenshine was with Yvette Toney.
The defense, however, challenged the idea that Anna was as obsessed with George as he made her out to be. The affair wasn't as serious as he thought.
You can see this sort of web that the prosecution spun of there being some fatal attraction. But honestly, the evidence showed just the opposite, that Dr. Gonzalez viewed that relationship incredibly casually.
My understanding of the relationship was it was a mutually satisfactory sexual relationship. So I don't believe she was ever looking for something deeper.
The defense also draws attention to many holes in the case against Anna, including a lack of due diligence in the investigation.
There were so many issues, whether it was the scientific evidence, whether it was the lack of investigation into the various suspects, whether it was the veracity of the witnesses that the state brought, whether it was sort of the overreaching nature of the prosecution's, very dramatic case.
But what would the jury believe? After deliberating for 2 days, they finally reach a decision.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo, guilty of aggravated assault of a person with whom the defendant had a dating relationship.
We asked for a lot of prison time because she had basically stolen years from Dr. Blumenshine.
Dr. Blumenshine has permanent lasting kidney damage. His kidneys don't work at full capacity. He has to watch what he eats and how much he drinks, and his life expectancy is probably shorter based on having the damaged kidneys. She was sentenced to 10 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
In her jealousy, Anna had not only hurt the man she loved, but ended a promising career as well.
She cried, not just for herself and her life, but maybe even more so for her parents, for her family. Had she known this would lead to this, I don't think she would have been with him.
Everyone loses. Dr. Blumenshine has lost a piece of life that he can't get back, and his life is forever altered. And women all over the world have lost someone who had the ability to cure and help breast cancer.
They were two promising young employees at a luxury hotel.
Both were excellent members of staff. They were known as punctual, good, solid, hard-working people.
Until they were both slain under mysterious circumstances.
They were met with a horrific scene, possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour.
That indicated a lot of anger, a lot of passion. This wasn't just some random attack.
The search for their killer would lead investigators down a dark and disturbing path.
He just had this sort of anger festering inside him that was just ready to erupt at any moment.
But the more clues they uncovered, the more bizarre the case becomes.
This must have just been so baffling for the investigators.
I've never seen anything like it in 14 years of dealing with murder.
August 10th, 2011, London, England. Around 3:15 p.m., managers at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Hotel outside Heathrow Airport call police after 3 of their employees go missing.
They were due to start a shift at 3 p.m. and they didn't show up. And that was very out of character for them. So the time went by and people began to get more and more worried.
The hotel staff had obviously trying to reach them by phone. Tried and tried and tried, to no avail.
When officers get there, they're told that 2 of the employees live in staff apartments behind the hotel. So that's where they start.
The officers enter, not knowing what they're about to discover.
They found what was essentially a bloodbath.
On the floor is the dead body of a young woman.
She'd been subjected to a horrendous stabbing attack.
They also noticed a trail of blood leading to the back bedroom. Now, when they go in there, they find another victim. The body of a young man, naked, laid out on the bed. It appears he's also been stabbed.
The victims are identified as 2 of the 3 missing employees. 20-year-old receptionists, Tibor Voss and Alice Adams.
It's not just horrifying, it's unimaginable. I mean, this just isn't the sort of place where something like this happens.
Tibor Voss was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, and although he came from humble beginnings, he had big dreams.
He came from a fairly poor background, but he was quite bright. I mean, he was a prodigious musician. He could play pretty much every instrument he turned his hand to.
His favourite instrument seems to have been the piano, which had been a gift from his grandmother.
It was 100 years old, and apparently this was something he played regularly and often and was very good at.
But in 2006, at the age of 15, Tibor's life changed forever when his father suddenly died.
Tibor certainly took on the role of the father figure, but due to his young age, his mother did struggle to make ends meet and pay for the family to live in Hungary.
Tibor was doing everything he could to improve his family's fortunes. He'd applied to the University of Budapest in 2008, but unfortunately he'd been turned down.
He was planning to apply to university the next year to have a second go.
In the meantime, Tibor decided to move to London to find work.
I think London offered him a fresh start in a big city somewhere in Europe. He could come to the UK, he could earn a bit more money than he could earn at home.
And in August of 2010, 19-year-old Tibor got his big break.
He had managed to get a job at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel, which is a stone's throw from Heathrow Airport.
It was where, travellers would stay or business people would stop in before going to the airport.
It seemed Tibor really loved his job, and he quickly made friends with all of the staff. It seemed like everybody loved him.
By all accounts, he sort of threw himself into his work. He was very good at it. He was well respected as a colleague.
One of the friends Tibor made was 20-year-old Alice Adams.
Alice was a local girl who lived with her family in Buckinghamshire. It seemed that she and Tibor bonded over their love for music.
She had an arts background, played musical instruments, played the guitar, and was a very entertaining personality.
Alice was working at the hotel to save up to take a trip of a lifetime.
Alice's aunt was due to get married later that month in Hawaii.
Her sisters were going, her mum was going. It was all booked and ready to go, and she was extremely excited.
Everybody had been rather infected by her enthusiasm since she'd arrived.
She was gregarious and funny, and certainly well liked among the staff at the hotel, and guests seemed to take to her as well.
Tibor and Alice quickly became integral members of the hotel staff. But as much as he enjoyed London, Tibor was determined to return to Budapest and help his family.
He reapplied to the University of Budapest that next year, and this time he got in.
He was going home to sort of pursue that academic dream.
Tibor was scheduled to leave on August 30th, 2011, but the long-anticipated family reunion would never happen. Instead, just 3 weeks before he was supposed to leave, Tibor and Alice have both been found murdered, and police have no idea why.
They were young, they were vibrant, and the scene was as baffling as it was gruesome.
There was a murderer who was prepared to kill 2 people at one time, at large.
Coming up, the crime scene reveals some disturbing clues.
It was an excruciatingly violent death that those victims had suffered.
Possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour.
London police are investigating the brutal murders of 2 hotel employees, 20-year-old Tibor Voss and his friend Alice Adams.
3 of the workers down for the 3 p.m. shift did not turn up. So eventually the police were called and kicked in the door.
They'd been found stabbed to death in Tibor's apartment behind the hotel when they'd failed to show up for work. They're not only looking at 2 extremely violent murders, but a missing person as well.
The first thing the police do is to seal the premises off, effectively, to restrict anybody else having access.
When homicide detectives arrive, they bring a full forensic team with them to go over the crime scene, looking for evidence.
You're trying to get a picture of what you're dealing with, you know. Who are they? What are they doing there?
There are no signs of the 3rd missing employee. There's also no sign of forced entry, and it doesn't look like anything was stolen. In fact, it appears there had been a wild party going on the night before.
There was evidence of alcohol consumption, and there was some drug paraphernalia around the flat.
Police found the remnants of poppers, which are essentially a sort of mood-loosening drug that you sniff. They tend to sort of diminish inhibitions.
Investigators don't yet know if the drugs have anything to do with the murders, but it seems possible, given the extreme violence involved.
There were 22 stab wounds to her, both to the front and the back.
That indicated a lot of anger, a lot of passion, and that tells detectives this wasn't just some random attack. Whoever did this likely knew Alice, and the position they found her body in strengthened that assumption.
She was covered with blood, and her face was covered with a cushion.
It could be that whoever killed her didn't want to see what he'd done, or perhaps if her eyes were open, he felt unnerved by that. It's very difficult to know.
When investigators began examining Tibor's body, the crime scene becomes even more disturbing.
Tibor was on his back on the bed with his knees, legs slightly raised, hands by his side.
It was like he'd been placed like a mannequin in a shop or something.
The pathologist determined that Tibor had been stabbed twice in the heart, but he wasn't on the bed when it happened.
He was naked. he'd sustained fatal stab wounds. You would expect to see a lot of blood on and around the body, but in this particular case, Tibor's body was very clean.
They realised that, in fact, to some extent, his body had been washed. They were able to see that there was diluted blood on his body.
Based on the evidence, detectives believe Tibor was stabbed on the sofa, then moved afterwards.
And there was a small mark at the small of his back, which was clear he'd been dragged on an abrasive surface.
The body had been moved and put into position, but they had no idea why.
In my experience, it's very, very unusual. I can only suggest that it's possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour by the killer.
Further examination reveals several other strange details.
Both victims had been attacked with a knife, but there weren't any defensive wounds. Alice had a cut on her arm, but you'd expect there to be more evidence if someone was trying to stop someone stabbing them to death.
But, I mean, that was one of the strangest things. So it was either they'd been caught unaware or perhaps they'd been sort of stupefied by the drugs and the alcohol that they'd taken.
That, combined with the fact that detectives couldn't find any trace of the killer in the apartment, meant this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment attack. Somebody planned this.
There was all this blood inside the threshold and everywhere, but there was no blood outside at all, which one would expect to find if someone heavily bloodstained had left the scene.
As deliberate as the killer seemed to have been, they hadn't even tried to get rid of the murder weapon.
On initial examination of the crime scene, several bloodstained knives were found within the flat.
On the one hand, you've got the injuries to Alice, which suggest a crime of passion, but on the other hand, you've got what happened to Tibor, which were almost sort of cold and calculating in nature.
This was quite clearly not a normal murder case. Even experienced detectives were looking at this scene and wondering what on earth was going on.
The hotel's security footage doesn't provide any leads either. So detectives turned to Tibor and Alice's co-workers, hoping they might be able to shed some light on what happened.
They got glowing reports on both Alice and Tibor. Both were excellent members of staff. They were known as punctual, good, solid, hard-working people.
Police learned that Alice had only been working there for a few weeks. She and Tibor were really close, but it wasn't a romantic thing. They just had lots in common.
Employees say the party at Tibor's apartment was to celebrate him finally getting into college.
We were told that the party was because Tibor Vass was due to go back to Hungary, so a celebration of sorts, or a going-away party.
He was leaving London and returning home, something that he was very happy about.
The colleagues had been with, in fact, Tibor and Alice. They were drinking. Alice played the guitar. There was singing, and they'd obviously had a good evening.
When it was time to go home, the only people left in Tibor's apartment with him were Alice and his roommate, 31-year-old Attila Ban.
That's the first they've heard of a roommate, but Attila isn't just living with Tibor, he's also a manager at the hotel. And he's the third missing employee.
They didn't know whether he was a victim, been kidnapped himself, or was a party to what had taken place.
Coming up, the search for Tibor's roommate turns up a possible motive.
Some speculated that it might be some sort of revenge killing.
A bizarre crime scene at a 5-star hotel in London has left detectives guessing. 2 employees have been murdered, and a third has gone missing. But is he another potential victim or a suspect?
We had learned from witnesses and colleagues that Attila Ban was nowhere to be found. Urgent inquiries were then undertaken to trace him.
They try calling his cell phone. Now, there's no answer, but it does let detectives see where the phone is currently located.
They could see it was pinging off a cell tower in the area near the hotel, but they just couldn't work out where he was. There was no sign of him. He was there, but he wasn't there. It was very odd.
In the meantime, investigators continue to interview other staff members at the hotel, hoping to learn more about Attila and his relationship with Tibor and Alice.
Attila Ban was from Hungary, like Tibor. But according to those who knew him, Attila's upbringing was very different.
He had an abusive childhood and then was brought up by his grandparents.
Things didn't get any easier for Attila as he got older.
He was homosexual. He realised that when he was aged about 17 and found that very difficult in Hungary.
He struggled to cope with the fact that he was gay. And in a country where that's not necessarily approved of.
Attila faced an uphill battle living in Hungary, so he decided to make a change.
He was clearly bright. He travelled to the United States and worked there for a while when he was aged about 25. Found life rather more tolerant there about his sexuality.
It seems Attila did fairly well in the States. He got some valuable work experience. But after a while, he decided to move again.
He came to London to better himself and try and get a career in the hotel business.
He had a history of working in the hospitality industry. He'd held similar jobs in the US.
He'd come over to the UK, first of all, to visit, but then had managed to get a job working at the Radisson Hotel.
Attila excelled at the Radisson, quickly becoming one of their most valued staff members.
He was a very successful employee. He was gregarious, outgoing, confident.
Customers were very, very quick to praise him. In fact, we never heard anything negative about Attila Ban at all.
As a reward, the hotel gave him one of their exclusive staff apartments to live in.
There were only a few of these, so it was deemed quite a step up to be offered one of these apartments.
That same year, Tibor Voss came to work as a receptionist. It didn't take long for the two to become friends.
I think Attila had recognised a fellow Hungarian who he could bond with.
Tibor was 20, Attila was 31. So Tibor probably thought of him as an older brother, someone he could look up to.
Attila Ban took Tibor under his wing and nurtured him at work and was clearly very impressed with Tibor and saw him as a kindred spirit.
Attila provided Tibor with valuable guidance, as well as a place to live.
Tibor was living in sort of dingy, rented accommodation, and when he sort of expressed the fact that he didn't like this, Attila had asked him to move in.
There'd been no secret about Attila's sexuality. And no suggestion that Tibor was homosexual either. And he was perfectly happy to share the flat with him. He was an older man, they came from the same country.
When Alice started working at the hotel, Attila was the one who showed her the ropes as well. And he was the one who introduced her to Tibor, and they all became good friends.
Now Attila has gone missing, and since witnesses place him at the crime scene, he seems to be the most logical suspect. Or he would be if investigators could come up with a motive.
He got on well with both these people. Both were charming, pleasant, young colleagues, and there was no apparent reason why they should have been killed.
Detectives still didn't know what to make of the strange, ritualistic way in which Tibor had been killed, so they decided to focus on Alice first.
Police would have thought that Alice was the target. I mean, it seemed that the rage had been directed against her.
When detectives take a look at Alice's cell phone records, they make an interesting discovery.
Analysis of Alice's mobile phone revealed a series of texts that had taken place on the night she died during the small hours of the morning.
She had been in contact with a former boyfriend of hers, Tad.
From what investigators were able to find out, the two had been together for a while, but only recently broken up.
He'd moved away to a different part of the UK to university, and so they were on and off again.
It had just been rekindled again at around about this time.
The records also showed that he and Alice had been in contact on the night of the murders.
They were apparently texting while she was at the party, and one of those messages really stood out to detectives.
She said she was in bed with her manager, Attila, and she'd also texted that Tibor was throwing up and drunk.
Investigators don't know much about their relationship at this point, but most boyfriends aren't going to be too happy with their girlfriends texting that they're in bed with another guy.
Did Alice's boyfriend show up at the apartment to take revenge?
With the phone conversations, he could have been jealous.
So maybe he drives over there, kills Alice and Tibor, and kidnaps Attila. For all they know, he could already be dead.
Coming up, a social media post takes the case in a new direction.
It was very mysterious. It just said simply, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare."
Hours after Tibor Voss and Alice Adams were found stabbed to death in his apartment, London police have a suspect. Alice's former boyfriend, Tad Finney.
The boyfriend is obviously the suspect you would look at first of all. She'd been on the phone to him a few times throughout the evening, I think once even to say that she was in bed with her manager, Attila.
However, lab tests from the evidence found in the apartment seem to indicate there was more going on than just a simple tryst.
Tibor and Attila's DNA was present on Alice, and also Attila Band's DNA was present on Tibor, obviously at this party. Some sexual activity had clearly taken place.
There's no real evidence to suggest that they'd partied together in this way before.
Did seeing his girlfriend involved in a threesome cause Tad to fly into a jealous rage? Investigators track him down to find out.
He didn't come across as a cold-blooded killer. He was very distraught and said he'd been at home the whole night after talking to Alice.
He was able to provide an alibi of sorts. The last text between them was around 3:30 in the morning, so what that showed to us was that Tad Finney's phone had been at his address.
Of course, that by itself doesn't necessarily prove that he's telling the truth, or that he had his phone with him. So they decided to follow up with a search warrant.
We checked his clothing for any signs of blood distribution or any suggestion that he could have been at the crime scene when the killings took place.
It became clear that he was nowhere near the scene and Tad couldn't have been responsible for the murders.
But if he didn't do it, who did?
As investigators are following up on this lead, they come across new information from one of the victim's co-workers.
A colleague from the hotel made police aware of a Facebook post from Attila Ban.
At about 7:30 that morning, there'd been a posting saying, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare."
This appeared to be an odd sentence to use. It was apparently entirely out of character. This post, with its potentially sinister connotation, didn't make sense.
The cryptic message does tell investigators one thing, however.
It confirmed to us that Attila Ban was clearly alive, but what we didn't know was where he was.
And if Attila's not a victim, there's only one other alternative.
It became clear that Attila Ban was a suspect, and they needed to find him as soon as they could to find out what had happened.
Detectives returned to the hotel to speak with Attila's friends. And this time, they discover there's more to this employee of the year than meets the eye.
People seemed to be a little hesitant to talk about it at first, but it seemed the rumor was that Attila liked Tibor a little bit too much, that he had a major crush on him.
Their co-workers say that Attila was well aware that Tibor wasn't gay, but he might have been hoping to change his mind.
Attila managed to arrange his rosters so that they would work together. They would finish work together. He arranged them to share the same flat.
As they spent more time together, the relationship grew, and so did Attila's feelings for Tibor.
Attila Ban was what I would describe as infatuated, almost obsessed with Tibor.
The problem was that it just wasn't reciprocated. Tibor was not interested. He was interested in women.
In the months leading up to the murders, Tibor and Attila's friendship started to suffer.
Tibor didn't appreciate all that he was doing for him in supporting him at work and really taking him under his wing.
There were frequent quarrels when he thought Tibor had sort of slighted him by leaving him out of a conversation or a social situation.
Colleagues say that on one occasion, they even saw the two men get into a heated argument.
Tibor had arranged for a staff photograph to be taken, and on the day it was taken, Attila was not in the photograph.
He was left out of this photo, and Attila was not happy about that at all.
And things only seemed to get worse once Tibor started becoming closer with Alice.
Attila was upset about that, clearly jealous of anybody else having a relationship with Tibor.
He wanted Tibor to be spending time with him. He'd got in the flat. Why was he off with this woman who just waltzed in there and had only been at the hotel a few weeks?
Had it been enough to finally cause Attila to snap?
He just had this sort of anger festering inside him that was just ready to sort of erupt at any moment.
And the whole thing was compounded by Tibor's intention to leave the UK. This is what we believe is motivation for the killings.
With Alice's boyfriend cleared of suspicion, Attila Ban has become the prime suspect. There's just one problem.
We were still left with the indisputable fact. We just didn't know where he was.
Not only do they not know where he is, they have no idea how he managed to flee the scene without anybody seeing him.
There were a number of theories that police worked up, that maybe he was in the loft, maybe he jumped out of a window, or maybe he'd been particularly cold and calculating and stashed a clean pair of shoes outside the front door so he could have put them on after the killing, made his getaway without leaving a telltale trail of blood.
We checked to see if there was any loft space or a crawl space or an adjoining property that may be linked that had some form of fire escape or escape route, but all to no avail.
The trail had gone cold, but the forensics team went back to the room to check it out again.
Coming up, investigators make a shocking discovery.
This is just a scene that nobody could ever have imagined or envisaged.
It must just have been mind-blowing.
It has been 2 days since the investigation into the murders of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams began. Detectives have narrowed the list of suspects down to one: Tibor's jealous roommate, Attila Ban. But he is nowhere to be found.
It was as if he'd vanished into thin air.
Hoping to find new leads, London police return to the crime scene. But as soon as they arrive, detectives immediately notice something is wrong.
So the police went back for another look to see what they might have missed at the scene. They saw that the door to the bedroom in the flat that had been left open, it was now closed.
It was very apparent that things had been moved around. A bottle of vodka had been moved, medication had been moved.
It could have absolutely meant that someone had broken into a crime scene, and that was probably their biggest fear.
Their first thought is that maybe somebody had broken in to tamper with the evidence. But when they get to the back bedroom, they find the last thing anybody could have expected.
My colleagues then went to push the door, and there was a heavy weight behind it. The bed had been pushed against the door.
Sort of forced their way into the bedroom, and just out of the blue there is Attila.
Investigators find their murder suspect lying face down on the bed.
He has appeared to be in a semi-comatose or drunken and confused state.
There are cuts to his wrist and on his throat, apparently in an attempt to commit suicide.
He was found with a number of superficial injuries, but these were only minor grazes.
He's caked in blood, with a craft knife sticking out of his arm and another one in his buttocks.
Once the officers realised that the man in the crime scene was indeed a prime suspect, Attila Ban, he was arrested straight away. But due to his injuries, he was taken straight to hospital.
But with the crime scene sealed off for the past 2 days, how could he have gotten in?
This must have just been so baffling for the investigators. So obviously they take another look at the crime scene and wonder where on earth he's appeared from in his naked form. So they pull the crime scene apart.
The mystery stumps investigators until one of them notices a small detail in the bedroom.
Looking at the sheets and the blood on it, they realised that there'd been a cut in the side of the divan bed. They lifted the bed up.
They find a space there just large enough for one person, and they realise that Attila didn't break in. He's been there the whole time.
Attila has essentially carved a hole in the divan underneath the bed and has been hiding there since the murder.
This is the same bed on which Tibor Vass's body had been found.
He had never left the premises at all, and whilst the investigators had been in the premises, he'd been hiding under the bed.
Police are dumbfounded. The entire time they were conducting their investigation, the killer had been right under their noses.
He'd cut out a section of the divan, almost as eye holes, if you like, in order to peer out and see what was happening. In my 14 years of dealing with murder investigations, I'd never seen anything of the like. I mean, it's crazy.
But he'd actually taken this primitive survival kit inside this. There's a bottle of water, a knife, and his mobile phone to keep him going in there.
But it seemed 2 days were as long as Attila could make it. After he's treated and released from the hospital, investigators sit down with Attila to find out what happened. Unfortunately, he's not talking.
The officers interviewing Ban were quite surprised to find that he said absolutely nothing. It was almost as if he'd been struck mute.
Detectives aren't sure whether this is just another deception or an indication of his mental state.
He just murdered his two closest friends, so it's possible he might have had some kind of psychotic breakdown. But at that point, there is no question that he did it.
Attila Ban was eventually charged with the two murders of Tibor Vass and Alice Adams, and up to that point, he continued to say nothing.
Attila kept his silence up for several weeks before he finally comes clean about what happened the night of the murders.
He tells them about the party for Tibor and how it was supposed to be a special party for him. And it appears Attila brought along some drugs just to spice up the celebration.
He explained about his offering poppers to people there and the taking of other drugs to party and to drink.
Attila claims he can't remember anything after that.
He portrayed an amnesia, a lack of recollection as to what had happened precisely.
He said he sort of woke up out of a stupor and there were the bodies, and so he figured he must have killed them, but he had no recollection of doing so.
It was their and my view that Attila Ban was suffering from a severe case of selective memory.
Coming up, Attila Ban faces trial for the murders of Tibor Vass and Alice Adams.
He tries to claim that he wasn't in a fit mental state when he murdered them.
But will the jury believe him?
Attila Ban was an extremely devious and manipulative individual.
On July 9th, 2012, nearly a year after the murders of Tibor Vass and Alice Adams, Attila Ban finally stands trial.
Attila Ban pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Which meant that he shouldn't be held fully responsible for the killings.
But prosecutors think otherwise. They paint Attila as a man who was obsessed with his roommate and became enraged when his affections were not returned.
Tibor and Alice, being such close friends, Tibor intending to leave the UK, coupled with Attila's almost obsessional pursuit of Tibor, all added to Attila's frustration.
All this anger and jealousy had been building and building for some time.
Prosecutors believe that on the night in question, Attila's desire for Tibor was finally realized in a drug-fueled sexual encounter. But it hadn't turned out the way he'd hoped.
Tibor had shown sort of more affection towards Alice. This had driven Attila mad.
Attila had that moment of realization that he's always going to prefer contact with women to me.
When Attila finally realized he would never have Tibor to himself, he snapped.
Attila felt that if he couldn't have Tibor, then nobody could.
Since neither of the victims had defensive wounds, prosecutors think that he might have waited until they passed out and then stabbed both of them.
One of the unsolved mysteries in this case was quite what had happened and in what order. It's very difficult to work out.
Prosecutors don't know why Attila took the time to clean and pose Tibor's body afterward, but it showed that he was clearly aware of what he had done.
I can't really give an opinion on why such an event may have taken place, what it may have meant, or why it may have happened.
As twisted as it might sound, it might have been Attila's way of paying last respects to the man he loved.
Attila's defense argues that his actions were consistent with a man who was suffering a severe mental breakdown.
They even put Attila on the stand to testify in his own defense, but that proved to be a mistake.
In giving evidence, Attila Ban rather kept a script, accepted he must have killed both Alice and Tibor. But he couldn't give any rational explanation really as to why he would have behaved quite as he did.
He wound up essentially bursting into tears, trying to convince the jury that there was no way that he could have done something like this in his right mind to his best friends.
I mean, he put on something of a theatrical show, really. He was very sort of over the top, putting on this show for the jury of being disorientated and not really understanding what was going on.
To the prosecution, Attila's claims of mental illness are just another ruse.
You would not be able to hold down a responsible job. So he was functioning, he was going out, he was working.
Attila Ban was an extremely devious and manipulative individual. And the fact that he was suffering from a mental illness, unfortunately, appears to be disproved when you consider that he had the presence of mind and the resourcefulness to secrete himself within the crime scene, and also to make provision within the confines of the divan bed to take water and other articles with him, in effect, as a hideout.
Even if there'd been a loss of control, I mean a real loss of control, provoked by something that had happened, that would only apply to one of them.
The jury agrees. On July 18, 2012, they find Attila Ban guilty on all counts.
The jury convicted Attila Ban of the 2 counts of murder that he faced, 1 count for Alice and 1 count for Tibor.
I believe the jury thought, as I do, that Attila Ban was an extremely devious and manipulative individual.
He was sentenced to a life in prison and will serve a minimum of 26 years. It must have provided some comfort to see him pay for what he did, but nothing can undo the pain he caused.
A disturbed man's jealousy had ended 2 promising young lives and shattered the lives of their families forever.
I've never encountered a case like that, ever, and I doubt I will ever encounter a case like that again.
This is one of the most tragic cases I've ever had to deal with. Tibor Vass and Alice Adams, who were effectively cut down in their prime with their whole lives before them, is some obsessive desire that couldn't be satisfied. But why Alice had to die, I'll never understand it.
She was a hard-working mother and entrepreneur.
She lived with her mother-in-law and her husband, and she had 5 children.
She was the one who was bringing in all the money, so they were relying on her.
Until a bold new venture put her in the crosshairs of a dangerous enemy.
One of the bullets went into a room that was occupied by a baby.
The panic, the fear, life as you knew it is no longer the same.
But was it the cost of doing business with the wrong people, or a personal vendetta?
Because of the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt. When people want revenge, they usually want it right away.
July 10th, 2006. Around 2:45 a.m., police in Largo, Florida respond to a reported break-in at a business in town.
The owner is a 39-year-old woman named Christina Ladrini. By the time officers arrived, she was waiting for them inside. It looks like some windows of the building had been shattered.
A witness had called it in from a nearby laundromat, and Christina had been immediately notified. But before an investigation even begins, Christina receives more disturbing news.
She's still giving a report to police when the phone rings. It's her husband, and he just said he heard gunshots outside of their house.
As the officer with Christina calls it in, she calls in an employee to supervise the shop so she can go home to her family. Deputies from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department are immediately dispatched to the couple's home.
Christina's family lived about 3 miles away in the neighboring town of Clearwater. When officers got there, they found glass all over the place, and the couple's minivan had been shot up.
No one was injured, but it still had to be very frightening.
Christina Ladrini has 5 children. They range in ages, including an 11-month-old baby. Everybody was freaking out, especially since it's in the middle of the night. It shakes an entire neighborhood.
No one else in the neighborhood appears to have suffered any damage. And since the shooting occurred just an hour after the break-in at Christina's shop, one thought is on everyone's mind.
Either this couple has the worst luck in the world, or someone was targeting them.
To those who knew her, Christina Ladrini was a loving wife and mother, doing everything she could to support her family.
Christina Ladrini was the eldest of 5 kids. In fact, she had 5 kids of her own. She came from a very hard-working family, and she valued family and health over wealth.
Growing up, it seemed like Christina was the typical girl next door. Sweet, well-intentioned, always seeing the best in people, including the man that she eventually fell in love with, Vincent Ladrini.
Vincent was known as kind of a bad boy, but to Christina, he was handsome, he was fun, he was a nice guy.
And after just a few years of marriage, Christina's faith seemed to have paid off.
They both had jobs, and they had a nice little house in Clearwater. It was a great place to raise their kids. From the outside looking in, they were just one big happy family.
Christina Ladrini had such a huge heart. She was a patient care technician. Her whole mission was to take care of her family. So in order to do that, she was willing to work as hard as she possibly could.
Over time, Christina even managed to put aside enough for her husband, Vincent, to start his own business.
Christina's husband kind of had big dreams. He didn't want to work for anybody else. He had aquariums in his house and thought he could run a business. So Christina had opened a business for him. He was gung-ho putting it together, but when it came down to the work, he didn't show up. So it was 6 months and the business went under.
With 5 kids under 18 and their resources running out, it fell on Christina to find a way to make ends meet.
She was pretty much the one who was bringing in all the money. So they were relying on her to pay for everything.
Christina was determined not to let this affect her children, But a patient care salary was simply not enough to live on. And so when she was offered an opportunity to make a lot more money, she took it without asking many questions.
The job turned out to be managing a store where the girls provided a variety of different services. In the front, they sold lingerie, aromatherapy candles, and stuff like that. In the back was used for lingerie modeling.
It wasn't Christina's dream job by any stretch of the imagination, but it was legal, it paid well, and she didn't have to entertain any clients.
It wasn't long before Christina's financial difficulties were over.
We're talking about a considerable amount of money. And no matter how strange the job may be, that's hard to say no to. After a year or so, she worked her way up.
She made more than enough to provide for her family, and in fact, she was able to actually start putting money aside again. But this time, Christina decided to invest in herself. She opened up a lingerie shop with one of her friends named Marcy.
Christina had to think about her children's futures, and she probably wasn't going to be able to put 5 kids through college working for someone else. Starting a business seemed like the next logical step.
There were already some similar businesses in the area, but Christina was convinced that the area could support one more. So when they saw a vacancy on Ulmerton Road, they wasted no time signing a lease.
But this new business venture would also run into trouble. Just 10 days after the grand opening, someone had broken into Christina's business and shot her husband's minivan full of holes, and police want to know why.
The 2 crimes occurred like an hour apart. Nothing stolen, just property damage. It looked like someone might be trying to send Christina a message.
Coming up, a disturbing phone call points investigators toward 2 possible suspects.
They were alleged to have serious problems with drugs, and plenty of people have seen at least one of them carrying a gun.
Florida police are investigating a pair of crimes against Christina Lodrini and her family. A break-in at her business in Largo, and shots fired outside their home in nearby Clearwater.
Investigators from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office were at the couple's home getting statements. Vincent and his neighbors reported hearing 4 or 5 gunshots, but it appeared that the only damage was to the minivan.
The front windshield was cracked in 3 places. 2 of the passenger side windows and the driver's side windows were shot out. And there was a bullet hole in the left rear quarter panel of the vehicle.
Thank God nobody got hit, nobody got shot, nobody got hurt.
A forensics team carefully inspects the area, but no shell casings or any other evidence can be found.
The first thing detectives are going to ask, do you have any enemies? Can you think of anybody that might want to hurt you?
Vincent couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm himself or his family.
He managed to catch a glimpse of the vehicle. However, Vincent said that after he heard the shots, he ran outside and saw a silver or gray SUV driving with no lights on. Unfortunately, it was too dark for him to get a license plate.
While Christina waits for her business partner to arrive, detectives start investigating the break-in scene.
The window had been shattered there as well, but there didn't appear to be any bullet holes. And there were no reports of gunfire in the area, so it was possible that it was unrelated. And they were looking for 2 different sets of suspects.
You might think attempted robbery, but when they walk Christina through the scene, there's nothing missing. That makes it look more like an act of vandalism.
Christina says she has no idea who had vandalized the shop. No angry customers, nor disgruntled employees. So maybe it's a group of teenagers or someone making trouble.
Unfortunately, police couldn't get any fingerprints from either the shattered glass or the front door.
While investigators finish their walkthrough with Christina, uniformed officers take a statement from the man who called in the report.
He had been washing his clothes at the 24-hour laundromat next to Christina's business. He said he was in his car waiting for the clothes to dry when he heard the sound of breaking glass. So he took cover and called police.
Unfortunately, that means he didn't see who did it, and he didn't see anyone leaving the scene at the time of the crime.
They hadn't found any leads at home, nor at the store. And while police weren't sure if the two crimes had anything to do with one another, if you're Christina, you gotta be pretty shaken up at that point.
When her business partner arrives, Christina returns home to care for her family. But as they try to recover, Christina receives an ominous phone call.
It was almost 6 a.m. at that point, and she just got finished talking to police. So she let it go to voicemail.
The voice wasn't one that she recognized, and in fact, she couldn't even tell if the voice were male or female. But the message they left was disturbing. They said they were representing their clients and that next time there would not be warning shots.
Christina immediately notifies police, and officers are sent to watch over the family.
She's terrified. She has no idea what my client means. That's something a lawyer would say, and that's obviously not the case here.
Whoever it was, they made it clear that these were targeted attacks. They shot up the family minivan, which could be taken as a threat to hurt her kids if she didn't do what they wanted. The problem was, they didn't say what they wanted. So there's nothing that she can do to stop it from happening again.
The panic, the fear, life as you knew it is no longer the same.
Detectives began interviewing Christina's employees and business associates, hoping to find a lead. They quickly come up with the names of two possible suspects.
One of the employees tells police that she and Christina used to work at a shop nearby owned by a woman named Kristen. She claims that Kristen and her boyfriend Donald were heavy drug users, and Donald often carried a gun.
Kristen apparently had a reputation for threatening former employees when they found work elsewhere, so Christina starting a rival business could clearly have set her off.
Christina's business partner, Marcy, even told detectives that she thought it might be Donald's voice on their threatening message.
Investigators traced the phone call, but unfortunately, the number is not registered to Donald or Kristen.
It's one of those pay-as-you-go accounts. What police call a burner phone. Anyone could set one up with any name they choose. So that turned out to be a dead end.
However, police find a possible connection. A witness places Donald and Kristen at the scene just a couple blocks from the shooting.
A convenience store clerk recognized two people matching the couple's description hanging around the store. They were in a 4-door truck with a broken back window.
Could this be the vehicle Christina's husband saw speeding away from their house after the shooting?
Christina told police that Donald and Kristen didn't live anywhere near her, so it was very suspicious they were there around the time of the shooting.
Detectives recommended that she activate the security cameras at her shop and install cameras outside the house as well. If they catch anyone lurking around, it'll help establish a pattern of harassment when it comes time to press charges.
Christina takes investigators' advice and installs the cameras. But no one could have anticipated what they would record. Coming up, more shots are fired, and this time, the consequences could be devastating.
Those bullets went through, hit a mirror above the baby's bed.
The morning after the attacks on Christina Lodrini's home and business, detectives in Largo, Florida have come up with a pair of possible suspects. Two rival business owners named Kristen and Donald.
Christina kind of stepped on their toes by opening a competing store, so clearly they were persons of interest in this case.
There was no direct evidence yet linking the couple to the shooting. Since the voicemail that Christina received had threatened further harm, police were taking it very seriously, and so was she.
The lead detective, he tells her to go get a surveillance camera. So she heads to her local Walmart, invests $25 into a camera for her home.
In the meantime, investigators are searching for their suspects. But so far, it looks like the pair are trying to avoid them.
They reached out to everyone who knew these two. Family, friends, neighbors, former employees. There's no way they didn't know police wanted to speak to them, but they still didn't surface. If they were innocent, you would think they'd want to come in and clear up any confusion.
Weeks pass, and thankfully, Christina and her family come under no further attacks.
Life sort of returned to normal, both at work and at home. The summer was winding down, and the kids were going back to school, and despite a rocky start, her business was actually doing pretty well.
It seemed like whoever threatened her might have gone away or given up, but investigators were still working the case.
A month and a half later, on August 24th, Donald and Kristen finally show up in a Pinellas County courthouse.
Turns out, they've been summoned on completely different charges, but investigators instantly recognized their names and brought them in for questioning.
They both lawyered up and would not talk. That certainly looked like they had something to hide, but without concrete evidence, police couldn't charge them with anything.
At that point, the investigation had basically hit a roadblock. The upshot is the danger to Christina and her family seems to be over.
But in the early morning hours of September 7th, police get another urgent call from Christina.
911, what is your emergency?
I just had shots fired into my house.
At what address, ma'am? Does anybody need a paramedic?
No, we don't, but I do need,
Let me put you right on the phone with the sheriff's office.
What Christina describes is completely terrifying. The previous gunshots were aimed at a vehicle. This time, whoever it was fired 6 shots directly into the Ladrini home, with 8 people asleep inside.
You have a home here now that's riddled with bullets. You have bullets actually lodged in the wall. You have a TV damaged. You have windows shattered. And you have even an 11-month-old baby grazed by some of that glass.
Those bullets hit a mirror above the baby's bed where glass fell into the baby's bed. To hear those rounds being fired and hearing glass break in your residence in the early mornings, got to be bone-chilling.
If the guns pointed a little bit lower or a little bit higher or a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right, this could have gone so much worse and would have been a real tragedy.
It seems that whoever threatened Christina and her family wasn't finished after all. But this time, investigators are hopeful that the suspect has been caught on tape.
Christina verified that the security cameras that she installed outside of her home were working. So they rolled back the footage to the time of the attack.
Thankfully, the coverage of the camera provided a pretty good look at the shooter. It appeared to be a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, and the way it goes down is extremely alarming to police.
It was chilling. You saw a vehicle pull up and stop. You saw a person get out, moving in a very particular way. Her gait, the person's movement, was noticeable. And then you saw that person pull out a weapon and start firing. And it's jarring because you don't see something like that often, thank God.
The way she's aiming and firing the gun. Officers know it all too well. Something clicks in their mind that this must be someone who's trained in law enforcement.
But that's not the only surprise.
The video is grainy. You may not be able to see the woman's face, but her walk is unmistakable. And it's a walk that Christina knows all too well. It's one of her closest, dearest friends.
Christina identifies the shooter as 30-year-old Courtney Savage, her best friend and former business partner.
The images shook her to the core. Why would Courtney have such animosity towards her?
They apparently spoke on the phone nearly every day. You'd think if your best friend had a problem with you, they'd tell you what it was before they started shooting.
Coming up, an officer of the law becomes a woman out for revenge.
She was angry, and she didn't deal with that anger very well.
Christina Ladrini and her family have once again been the target of a terrifying attack. And what's even more frightening is the identity of the shooter.
This isn't some stranger with a grudge. Courtney Savage is one of her closest friends. And not only that, it turns out she's a former police officer.
Courtney wanted to be in law enforcement since she was a teen, so she trained for it. And that's where she met her husband as he was going to be a police officer also?
I started dating my husband at the time when we were in the Corrections Academy, and we ended up getting married in March of '99.
After they graduated from the academy, they both got jobs working at Florida prisons.
I was hired as a correctional officer for Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Worked there for a little while, but I wanted to, go onto the law enforcement side. So I got a position as a reserve officer for Tampa Police Department.
However, Courtney quickly discovered the job wasn't all she hoped it would be.
She was not making much money. I think she was making $8 an hour. And it was very difficult.
You're right on the streets with them. You're in full uniform and you're, doing everything a regular police officer would do. The only thing is that you are part-time. It was stressful.
She saw ads in the paper for lingerie modeling. So she looked into it, and there was really very little that I could do to change her mind.
Soon, Courtney was earning more as a model than she could have ever imagined.
We wanted to take vacations, if we wanted to, whatever we wanted to do, we had the money for, which was a help. And it was good for a while.
Courtney eventually decided to go into business for herself.
What was the point in working for other people that she could do the same thing? She could own the shop. So she went around, looked for a place to rent. She found one. She stocked it. She hired people to help her.
One of the people Courtney hired was Christina Lodrini.
She was reliable and responsible, kind of someone you can always call, you can count on. I automatically said I want her to come work for me.
They worked well together, and as they got to know each other, they became close friends.
So in 2005, when health problems left Courtney bedridden, she turned to Christina for help.
Courtney was ill due to heavy metal poisoning from dental work she received.
She went to Mexico to have her teeth done. Unfortunately, the products that they use for the teeth down there have a lot of mercury and other chemicals in them.
Started having grand mal seizures. I had pain all over. It was terrible. High fevers. It was bad. I was on a lot of seizure medicine. I was on a lot of antidepressants, sleeping medicine, sedatives, everything you can think of. I had a laundry list of pharmaceuticals I had to take every day.
So she was in no condition, emotionally, physically, mentally, to be at a business, let alone run it. So, she took a couple of months off. She entrusted the business to someone she considered a friend.
I knew Christina for 9 years. She was my best friend. I thought I could rely on her.
Christina tells detectives that she kept the shop running as long as she could, but she ran into an unforeseen problem.
She approached the landlord to renew her lease, but the landlord told her he was actually going to give it to the bar owner next door so he could expand his business.
That was not the kind of problem she expected to deal with when she agreed to help out, but Courtney was in no place to handle it, so she had to do something.
But Christina wasn't going to stop there. She made a vow to her friend. She actually begged the landlord to please reconsider. She even offered to double the rent, but the landlord simply would not budge.
Christina says she was forced to clean out Courtney's shop and made arrangements to return the unsold merchandise.
It wasn't her fault, but I'm sure she still felt terrible about it.
In Christina's eyes, they parted amicably. She thought that her friend knew that she did everything that she could to save the business, and these circumstances were out of control.
It's definitely the type of thing that can cause bad blood between friends, but this had happened more than a year ago. So if Courtney held a grudge, you would think she would have done something about it before now.
Christina has identified Courtney as the shooter captured on tape, but the footage is too grainy to guarantee a conviction. So investigators ask Christina to help them obtain more evidence.
Detective Lewis had Christina make a controlled phone call to Courtney, asking her strategic questions about the shooting of the residents and her involvement.
She called me and accused me, oh, did you shoot up my house? And I said, are you crazy or something? I don't know, something like that.
However, it quickly becomes clear that Courtney still blames Christina for what happened to her business.
Courtney denies at first that she had anything to do with the shooting. But after further pressing, Courtney admits that she was very angry at Christina, felt that she drove the business into the ground.
I would call the shop and nobody would answer. And I thought, what are they doing? Then my landlord, he told me the story that she hadn't paid any rent, that he had put a formal eviction on her door.
Christina denies the landlord's allegations, but the more they discuss it, the angrier Courtney becomes.
The motivating factor was revenge. She felt manipulated, taken advantage of.
Tina had ruined her business, had lied to her, had betrayed her.
When Christina finally asks Courtney what she can do to end the attacks, investigators get the closest thing they've heard to a confession.
She offered me a figure, like $2,000 or something, and asked, well, will it stop? And I said, well, that's a start.
They agreed to meet at a diner in Clearwater at 10 p.m. Christina tells Courtney she'll bring the money in cash, but police are there waiting for her. Coming up, Courtney's arrest takes an unexpected turn.
She lunged for a weapon that was in the glove box.
Less than 24 hours after security cameras caught former police officer Courtney Savage firing a gun into Christina Ladrini's house, detectives are getting ready to arrest her.
The trap has been laid because Christina is able to convince Courtney to meet her so she could give her $2,500 that Courtney feels that she is owed.
Officers follow Courtney to the diner where they spring the trap. But the arrest doesn't exactly go according to plan.
Because of Courtney's training, the police knew that they had to move very quickly. They could not give Courtney the upper hand.
My doors automatically unlock my truck, and I see this person coming up alongside of my truck, just like slithering alongside of my truck, and rips my door open. And in one fluid movement, he grabbed me from the seat to the ground, and started tasing me.
It was conveyed to me that she lunged for a weapon that was in the glove box and had to be tased.
Never said, this is a please get out, nothing. It was open my door and snatch at me. So of course my reaction is going to be like, what do you know, there was no time to resist. I didn't know what was going on.
Back at the station, detectives give Courtney a chance to explain herself.
When a suspect is taken into custody, a lot of times they shut down. They don't say anything. But Courtney surprises everybody. She's willing to talk.
Well, I'm an honest person, and I figured it would be easy for me if I just, told the truth. Yeah, I did it, I shot into a house. I was the type of law enforcement officer that if you were straight with me, I was going to go easy on you. That's the way I was, and I just assumed that was the best route to go.
Courtney goes into great detail on why she did it. She claimed that Christina owed $2,500 in unsold merchandise that was never returned to her, and $15,000 worth of other business equipment that went missing when the shop was under Christina's supervision. She felt completely betrayed.
But instead of confronting her friend, Courtney had let her anger fester for almost a year.
A few months after Courtney recovered from all of her health problems, she discovered Christina was about to open another business with a different friend. This set her over the edge.
She told me that she was very, very angry at Tina, wanted to get back at her, wanted to get revenge.
This is a bizarre case because when people want revenge, they usually want it right away. Courtney Savage acted out over a 90-day period.
According to Courtney, the first attack was intended to put Christina out of business.
Courtney said she hoped that Christina's landlord would revoke her lease. If she was attracting that kind of trouble, maybe they would have evicted her.
And Courtney used a voice-disguising device to leave Christina threatening voicemails.
When that didn't work, things sort of escalated from there. Christina hadn't responded to the voicemail threats, so she decided to go over there in the middle of the night to vent her frustrations.
I just lost it and went over there and just, I was trying to scare her,
Despite narrowly avoiding any casualties, Courtney insists that she never meant to harm anyone.
I'm a master marksman. The reason I got out of the truck was to make sure that my bullets just didn't fly everywhere. I wanted to make sure that I was, aiming to a point where I could see where my bullets were going.
She said she was the one driving the SUV that Christina's husband saw leaving the scene. There were no accomplices. The SUV was a rental, so she wouldn't be recognized.
I didn't want to use my vehicle, And plus, the vehicle was also my husband's truck, so I didn't want him to get in trouble or anything.
She even tells investigators where to find the gun she used.
Courtney says the Glock isn't the one they're looking for. She actually used the .357, which she got rid of afterwards.
Courtney had hidden the gun in my mother's mobile home shed down in Clearwater.
She filled out a written statement confessing to all of her actions. As far as she was concerned, that would be the end of it. She would just get probation.
I cooperated with the detectives. I was originally charged with shooting into an occupied dwelling, and I'd never been arrested before, and I didn't foresee any major problems from it.
It's the first clue that investigators have that she feels she did nothing wrong.
Had the mercury poisoning from her botched dental work affected Courtney's judgment?
It definitely was not in my normal state of mind. When you chew food or when you drink something hot, the heavy metal releases a vapor and it goes up into your brain. And what they used to call that was Mad Hatter syndrome.
If Courtney was expecting a slap on the wrist, she is sorely mistaken.
They sent me over to the jail side. I tried to arrange bond right away. And then I couldn't arrange bond because they pulled back the shooting to an occupied dwelling charge and started amending it.
The allegations were very serious, and it happened on more than one occasion, so the state attorney's office would be coming hard at Courtney.
Coming up, a routine hearing turns into a nationwide manhunt.
Had a whole new identity.
She was considered a fugitive of justice.
Courtney Savage has confessed to firing 6 bullets into the home of her best friend, Christina Ladrini, as payback for letting her business fall into ruin.
I knew I'd never get any money back. I knew I'd never have my business back. I just wanted her to admit that she betrayed me.
Despite the fact that no one was injured, there is a lot for prosecutors to consider when weighing the charges. The fact that Courtney seemed to believe that what she did wasn't that big of a deal certainly didn't help.
The charges against Courtney are increased to include 8 counts of attempted murder.
The district attorney at the time threatened Courtney with 7 life sentences. We were terrified.
At that time, her and her husband were going through a divorce. The divorce was finalized, and she obtained some money from the divorce, which allowed her to post a bond.
Courtney's preliminary hearing is set for July 20th, 2007, but she never shows up.
When she found out that they were changing the charges, she made up her mind to go on the run. She went on the lam in Mexico to have plastic surgery to alter her profile.
I, packed some bags and left everything behind. I had a brow lift, an eye job, nose job, chin contour, had a whole new identity, clean identity I purchased.
The court immediately issues a warrant for her arrest, and the manhunt begins.
She was considered a fugitive of justice. Detective Lewis did an excellent job and did everything that any seasoned investigator would have done. He tracked down old friends, interviewed the mom, and even tracked her up to New Jersey, where she was from, finding old acquaintances.
But despite their best efforts, Courtney manages to elude police for over a year. And with her new appearance, she returned to the U.S. undetected.
I'd laid low for a while in Oklahoma. I figured, what's a great place to blend in? I didn't use any credit. I had worked 2 different bartending jobs, actually, and they both paid under the table. I was in Oklahoma for about 5.5 months.
Florida police weren't making any headway, so they eventually chose to enlist the help of the media.
It was posted in the Tampa paper that I was going to be on America's Most Wanted.
The episode featuring Courtney airs on September 20th, 2008, 2 years after the initial shooting.
It was very upsetting. I wanted to turn away, but I had to watch it. I had to. It was the first time I had seen the video of her shooting into Tina's house, and it was just anger and sadness and hopelessness. Hopelessness, because you don't know what you can do to get your child out of this terrible predicament.
2 days later, a viewer calls the tip line with her location.
I had a really, really bad feeling that day, just horrible feeling. And I saw this man watching me. So I ran around the corner and I started to call my boyfriend at work. And as I was walking around the corner, here comes 2 patrol units. And I knew they were for me.
Surveillance deputies identified her. The team leader made a decision to approach, and they arrested her and took her into custody.
This time, Courtney doesn't resist. She is quickly extradited back to Florida.
She had to face the original charges that she was facing when she left. The state attorney's office added yet another charge for failing to appear in court. Her maximum exposure was, again, more than 100 years in jail.
She still had the option of taking her case to trial, but with that much evidence against her, she had very little chance of winning.
We started offering different pleas. They kept rejecting them. Then eventually they came back with 20 and 10 or go to trial.
It was the best she could have expected, given the serious nature of these charges.
On April 15th, 2009, Courtney Savage pleads guilty to all charges. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
For Christina, you can imagine that justice is finally being served. It's finally closure for the victim's family and closure for police, too.
It was a terrible crime, but I thought the sentence was a bit much. You lock someone up, throw them away, and you don't give them any kind of counseling.
In my heart of hearts, I really believe that if she had stayed and she didn't run, she would have gotten a much better sentence than she ended up with.
What started out as best friends involved in a business had ultimately ended with an act of betrayal.
It was a terrible thing that had happened, and what a shame that 2 friends would end up this way. Horrific sadness.
Would tell Christina, I'm sorry it had to happen that way. I feel like there were, things that were done to me that kind of pushed me over the edge. With the problems I was having mentally and with my health problems, I feel like I would never have done this in a normal situation.
There's certain professions that you hold at a higher standard. A police officer shooting into a home with children inside and then claiming she didn't hurt anybody, so she should be on probation. Unbelievable.
She was New York's infamous realtor to the stars.
She didn't just want to be Linda Stein. She wanted to be Linda Stein in all capital letters, and that's what she was.
She had a certain style for a certain era.
Until her trademark toughness earned her a dangerous enemy.
My mom is in a puddle of blood. Can you help me?
There were blunt force trauma wounds on her head.
The investigation into her death would take police behind the closed doors of New York's elite into a world of entertainment, power, and betrayal.
You know those Agatha Christie stories where a person gets killed and it turns out that everybody in the room had a motive? That's what this case was like.
As I was always told, you never rule anybody out as a suspect.
Tuesday, October 30th, 2007. It's the night before Halloween in one of New York City's most affluent neighborhoods. But for one family, a nightmare is unfolding. Just before 10:30 p.m., police receive an emergency call from a frantic young woman.
Oh my God, please.
Police operator 1142 at your emergency. Hello?
Please, I need an ambulance.
Okay, what happened in there?
My mom, she's dead, I think. Help me. Help me.
Hello?
She said she came home and found her mother lying in a pool of blood at the bottom of the stairs. She had no idea what had happened.
Officers are immediately dispatched to the location, a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side.
As soon as they get there, they can see the victim is dead. No pulse, no breathing. But it's hard to tell what had happened because she's wearing some sort of sweatshirt hoodie and it's covering her head.
There was a pool of blood on the floor, which could indicate a couple of things. In our training, we're not allowed to touch the body, so we have to actually wait for the medical examiner.
Somebody could make the assumption that she possibly could have slipped and fell and banged her head.
But a closer look reveals that this was no accident.
That was all pretty much put to rest when they realized there were holes in the top of the hood because of multiple blunt force injuries.
This woman did not fall. Someone beat her to death.
Somebody being bludgeoned to death and their body left bloody in their own apartment, that just doesn't happen on Fifth Avenue.
And the identity of the victim was even more surprising. One of New York's most notable celebrities, 62-year-old Linda Stein.
Everybody knew who Linda Stein was. She was sort of like one of the main characters in the ongoing soap opera that is New York City. You get these stories in New York of a certain period in the late 60s and early 70s of scrappy outer borough people who come into New York and seek their fortune, usually in entertainment. I'm talking about people like Neil Diamond or Carole King or Phil Spector. Well, Linda Stein was one of those people.
The daughter of a kosher caterer, Linda was born in Manhattan, but raised in the Bronx.
It's really basically the suburbs. And she had a very reasonable, middle-class, Jewish, ordinary, kind of boring life.
After high school, Linda seemed content to stay close to home. In her 20s, she was teaching grade school in the Bronx, but that didn't last for long.
In the late 60s, Linda's life took an unexpected turn when she met Seymour Stein, an up-and-coming music producer whose niece was in Linda's class.
Seymour Stein's record label was Sire Records, one of the most progressive labels of its time. It still exists.
They hit it off right away and began dating. Seymour introduced her to the New York music scene, and she absolutely loved it. It didn't take long for her to quit her job as a school teacher.
She went off to Manhattan, and her life changed completely. She embraced rock and roll. She embraced the counterculture. She joined the underground at a time when the underground was the coolest thing, not just in New York, but in the whole world. Andy Warhol, the works. She was a big part of it.
In 1971, 26-year-old Linda and 29-year-old Seymour decided to become partners, both in life and in business.
Seymour's considered a musical guru. He discovered so many bands. Depeche Mode, he signed Madonna. I mean, just the list goes on and on and on.
They were two people from the neighborhood who had made it and become super cool in the coolest place in the world. And now they were married and a force to contend with. She started to accomplish things by herself. With her friend Danny Fields, she discovered the Ramones. Linda brought them all around the world and turned them into the biggest underground music act of the 70s.
In addition,
through, maybe because they were being combative with one another, but this wasn't a War of the Roses situation where they were tormenting one another. They also were raising daughters, and in fact, Seymour was actually helping Linda out in her business.
After the breakup, Linda decided to launch a new career, this time in real estate.
We met when I worked at Studio 54. As a realtor, connections are paramount. They're the most important thing, especially in a city like New York. And Linda knew everyone.
Madonna, Sting, Billy Joel, Christy Brinkley, and the list goes on and on. Linda worked so many high-profile deals that in the 80s she eventually became known as the real estate agent to the stars. She was also regularly featured in the gossip columns.
She was in Page 6 8 times in 1 year. She didn't just want to be Linda Stein, she wanted to be Linda Stein in all capital letters, and that's what she was in the 80s.
Linda was kind enough after I got my license to take me on under her wing.
With her brash style and fierce determination, Linda once again rose to fame and fortune. But her greatest challenge was yet to come in her late 40s.
In the early 90s, Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through 2 radical mastectomies.
Linda was so determined to overcome any adversity. Very sweet in a lot of ways, but she was the toughest woman. She was cancer, gonna beat cancer.
Linda survived breast cancer, but in 2005, doctors discovered a benign brain tumor that started causing more health problems. But any hope Linda might have had for a full recovery is now over. Instead, she's become the victim of a brutal attack, and investigators want to know why.
She was brassy and confrontational with everyone. Those of us in the media were saying, well, this is Linda Stein. Who did she annoy? Who did she betray at the office? Or a lover maybe who she spurned? Maybe a rival real estate broker? You know, anything went in terms of the suspect list because this was Linda.
Coming up, the list of enemies turns out to be longer than anyone expected.
Even the people who loved her the most said that she was a verbally abusive person.
Detectives in New York City are investigating the murder of 62-year-old celebrity real estate broker Linda Stein. Their only witness is Linda's daughter Mandy, who found her body and called 911.
Mandy was a documentary filmmaker in Los Angeles, but she had been staying with her mother in New York while she was working on a film. She told police she had come home around 10:30 p.m.
Mandy shows up at the penthouse apartment on 5th Avenue. She goes upstairs, she goes into the apartment, and she sees her mother lying face down in the living room with her sweatshirt pulled over her head.
Mandy did state that she found her mother not breathing and there was blood on the floor. Said she last spoke to her earlier in the day.
Mandy Stein was very helpful in the investigation, giving us information of who was in Linda's life. But it took some time to get that information. She was very, very upset.
As Mandy speaks to detectives, the medical examiner arrives to confirm the cause of death.
She started going over the body. She removed the hoodie over the head. Once she started, she noticed that there were lacerations on the top of the head.
They were ruling Linda Stein's death a homicide by blunt force trauma.
It's not like she has one cut and she hit her head or something. There's multiple cuts on the back of her head. Blows from the back of the head. That is a possibility that it was a surprise that happened.
She was bludgeoned, hit maybe 6 or 7 times, police said, with some sort of heavy object.
While Linda's body is removed for an autopsy, investigators begin searching for the murder weapon.
We now know we're looking for some type of blunt object that could cause the injuries that killed her.
We didn't have the murder weapon at all in the apartment. Our crime scene looked for it. They couldn't find anything. We also don't know exactly what we're looking for yet until we get to the autopsy.
However, police do find several other clues.
The fact that she had the hood over her head. I mean, in other cases, we've always taught that when somebody covers the face, it's usually because that person knows that person.
There had been no forced entry and no sign of a struggle, so it appeared she let her attacker in.
Usually when it's a sign of a struggle, you would see like chairs knocked down, this knocked down, something broken. We really didn't see that somebody was in the apartment with her when this happened.
It didn't apparently look like a robbery, so why would somebody kill this woman?
I got a call from Linda's daughters, Samantha and Mandy, very early Halloween morning, and I think it was Mandy who said to me, "Mommy's dead." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" It was completely incredible. Mommy is dead, Mommy is dead.
Widening their search, detectives canvass the building in the hopes that one of the residents might have seen or heard something.
The neighbors were shaken because it's such a nice neighborhood. And on top of that, the building is completely secure. Pretty much nobody makes a move without knowing who came in.
Fifth Avenue in New York is probably everybody's last guess at where unspeakable violent crime would take place.
Unfortunately, no one described seeing anything out of the ordinary. No one in the building they didn't recognize, no strange deliveries, nothing like that.
However, investigators do learn that there is a long list of people who disliked Linda.
We spoke to a number of employees of the building that would say that Miss Stein could be an abrupt person, sometimes have a nasty attitude towards people, and that made people feel uncomfortable.
Even the people who loved her the most said that she was a verbally abusive person, said that she could be cruel to them all the time.
Linda was a tough cookie. She had a certain style for a certain era. Linda could definitely, as much as I loved her, could definitely rub people the wrong way. She had a mouth, as they say.
In fact, police discovered that Linda recently clashed with some of the construction workers who were renovating the building.
They were putting a new roof on the building. There may have been as many as 30, 40 construction workers that were in and out all day.
The crew was working directly above Linda's penthouse apartment. She often complained about the noise, and she had a shouting match with some of the workers who one day showed up at her door unannounced.
They got off the wrong floor. They knocked on the door. She felt, they shouldn't even be there.
Could Linda have pushed one of them too far?
What we were learning is that they felt that Linda was mean to them. She would always curse them out because they were making so much noise. We were told that she would call them names. She would tell them to get the F out of here, stop making a racket. It was almost a daily thing.
One thing that people were saying after Linda Stein died is maybe she finally ticked off the wrong person.
Coming up, the list of suspects continues to grow.
As I was always told, you never rule anybody out as a suspect.
It's been several hours since celebrity real estate agent Linda Stein was found beaten to death in her penthouse apartment, and detectives have no shortage of potential suspects.
You know those Agatha Christie stories where a person gets killed and it turns out that everybody in the room had a motive? Well, that's what this case was like, only the room was the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and the real estate business and the rock and roll business. At one point or another, this particular victim had made enemies of everybody in all of those worlds.
We interviewed many people that are employed at the building, service-oriented people that did say that Linda Stein can be abrupt, can be nasty in the way she talks to people at times, and, avoided it.
Investigators are particularly interested in speaking to a group of construction workers Linda argued with several days before.
It wasn't considered a manhunt looking for a individual because we had just so much to do with the people at the building. We had enough to do without saying we're going to be looking for a certain individual. We had to go through everybody first.
We spoke to the elevator operator. We spoke to the super.
Police found out that construction workers used a back service elevator and could only gain access to the apartments by a back door, and even then the superintendent had to let them in.
But when investigators check Linda's apartment, they find the service door bolted shut.
The door was actually locked from the inside. There's only one key, and then you have the deadbolt, which there's no key for from the outside.
When police tracked down all of the construction workers who had been working in the building that day, they all said none of them had ever even been inside Linda's apartment.
From the interviews that were done, nobody could establish a motive that one of the workers were involved in killing Linda Stein.
With the construction workers cleared, investigators turned their attention to who else was in the building that day.
We started watching the surveillance footage. Once we established that it was a homicide, we did go with the super, and the super let us view the video.
Since the elevator operator was able to identify everyone who came in and out of the building that day, he was able to help narrow down the search quite a bit.
We spoke to him in regards to, besides Mandy, who came out before. He said it was only one other person who came in a couple times during the day, and that was Natavia Lowry.
Detectives learned that 26-year-old Natavia Lowry is Linda's personal assistant, hired by the real estate company Linda worked for.
They hired a temp agency to help them procure personal assistants for some of their top brokers. If you did a certain amount of money, which Linda always certainly did, you were actually entitled to have an assistant that they would pay for.
Of course, police were going to want to talk to her because she had access in and out of the building, and most likely she was the last person to see Linda alive.
When I first met Natavia, she was surprised about hearing this news, that her boss was murdered. She seemed upset, but she wasn't weeping. She was a very attractive young lady. She was a graduate of North Carolina State. She was very intelligent. She aspired, I believe, to be an actress.
On the face of it, they may not have had a lot in common. An established celebrity real estate broker and a young woman who really has absolutely no job history or no career to speak of and comes from nowhere, from a mile away from Williamsburg out in Brooklyn. But on the other hand, they both are outsiders who have come into Manhattan, and it's just that Linda's a little further along the track.
According to Natavia, working for Linda was often challenging, but always rewarding.
She could be rude to some of the workers. She had witnessed that, but overall, she got along with her. She told me it was tough, but she was learning a lot.
It was not your typical business assistant job. It was almost like a home health aide job, combined with clerical work and phone answering.
According to Natavia, Linda smoked a lot of marijuana in order to deal with the pain, and she also required a lot of assistance.
She's slowing down, but, you know, you can see when somebody has something major like a brain tumor, it affects them.
She would set up Linda's appointments, saw a lot of her bill paying, a lot of her financial stuff for the short time she was there. She would also do things like get her lunch, do her makeup, anything that she would need.
Investigators are particularly interested to know what she and Linda were both doing that day.
Natavia said she had shown up at the apartment to take care of the normal chores, but like so many mornings, Linda wanted to take a power walk.
Natavia indicated that at some point during the day, Linda was going to go out and do one of those fast-paced walks. I did her makeup, and I left the building a couple times to go to the office to get some supplies.
When police asked Natavia how she got to work every day, she said she always walked, less for the exercise and more to save money. She said she expected to see Linda at the office later that day, but she didn't.
She left Linda a long voicemail, a very routine, run-of-the-mill, ho-hum, hi, but making it clear that she wasn't there, that she didn't see Linda, that Linda was out somewhere, and that she would see her tomorrow.
When detectives ask her if she knows of anyone who might want to hurt Linda, Natavia tells them about a former lover.
Raul, at age 49, was nearly 15 years younger than Linda. He started out as her protege, but in 2005, their relationship took a romantic turn.
I remember staying at the house a couple of weekends in the Hamptons. Raul came to stay with Linda. He seemed to genuinely really like her a lot. Yeah, that I could see.
But according to Natavia, Linda had broken up with Raul when she discovered he was using her.
He wasn't as into her as she was into him. In fact, he wanted her for her business contacts.
The New York real estate industry is incredibly cutthroat. You're dealing with apartments and commissions that run into the millions and millions of dollars just for being someone's agent or just for selling an apartment.
It makes you wonder if he wanted payback for Linda cutting him out of her life. Did he want to become the realtor to the stars?
Coming up, the surveillance tapes lead to a startling revelation.
She noticed something that nobody else picked up on, a reflection in the glass.
On November 2nd, 2007, Linda Stein is laid to rest. Among the mourners are some of New York's biggest celebrities.
It wasn't just celebrities. All of her family and friends and co-workers from the real estate agency were there as well.
The thing that I remember most of all is standing in the back in the doorway crying was Natavia Lowry. It was wrenching, really, because this was an open murder case. And nobody knew who did it. And her daughters both spoke. One spoke tearfully, the other spoke with rage about trying to find out who had done this to their mother.
Linda's ex-husband, Seymour Stein, also spoke at the funeral and gave a very powerful eulogy.
He was very emotional. He was in disbelief that something like this could happen. And this is years after they had been married.
Linda's ex-husband and their two daughters are all cleared. Detectives' best remaining suspect seems to be one of Linda's former lovers, Raul, who Linda had broken up with a year prior to the murder.
If he was dating Linda only for her contacts in the real estate agency, then he lost his best chance at success when Linda broke up with him. But unfortunately, he didn't pan out as a suspect either.
I did interview Raul. He was eventually ruled out. He could account for his time. I could account that he wasn't in and out of the building that day based on the video surveillance. So, yes, he was one of the few personal friends that we spoke to that we ruled out as soon as we spoke to him.
At that point, police were pretty much back at square one. So they went back to the security footage from the building, hoping they had missed something.
Different detectives were watching 24 hours of video from 5 or 6 different cameras, 24 hours of sitting there watching. It takes time, it's tiresome.
While that was going on, a forensics team went through every inch of Linda's penthouse apartment looking for clues.
They did major surgery on that apartment. They were pulling door jambs off the walls, and they went into the bathroom and they pulled the entire basin going down into the drain to see if maybe somebody had left a hair or skin cells or anything that might connect Linda to someone else at the time of her death.
Despite the massive effort, the team comes up empty-handed. But a few days later, police finally catch a break, thanks to one sharp-eyed investigator.
She was looking at the video, and she noticed something that nobody else picked up on. The front glass door was opened by the doorman. And as it opened, it caught a reflection in the glass of Natavia getting out of a cab holding money in her hand.
That was something that immediately stuck out to police because it contradicted part of her earlier statement.
Discrepancy in her 2 prior statements was picked up. She had told us that she always walked wherever she went when she left the building that day of the murder, based upon what we saw on video. And it was the first time we were able to say, she's not telling us the truth about something.
If Natavia had been caught on tape lying about taking a cab back to Linda's apartment that day, what else could she be lying about? When the autopsy report comes in, it contradicts another part of Natavia's story.
She had stated that she put makeup on Linda before Linda left to walk to work We had learned that her body was examined by the medical examiner's office, and there were no traces of makeup on Linda that day.
If it's just one of these things, you might think that she either misspoke or didn't remember correctly, but taken together, this was a major red flag.
If people lie about the little things, there is potential that they could be lying about the bigger things. Everything needs to be investigated.
On November 8th, 2007, 9 days after Linda's murder, detectives sit down with Natavia for another interview.
During the interview, we asked her about being truthful, about where she went when she left the building. Her bubbly demeanor started to diminish. She started to get upset when we started asking her about where she'd been. We know you weren't walking to work. We know you got into a car. We know it was a cab.
Instead of answering, she'd ask for bathroom breaks. When she came back from the bathroom, she seemed much calmer. Detectives later learned she had used that time and used her phone to text her boyfriend in Virginia.
They were talking about how much they loved each other. I can't wait to see you. It's kind of interesting that that's what she would choose to do in the middle of an interview, but so be it.
Since Natavia doesn't seem to be taking their questions seriously, investigators decide to turn up the heat.
She started changing her story about the first interview she gave me. She started getting emotional.
Natavia finally decided to come clean and tell police exactly what happened that night. And it was one hell of a story.
Coming up, an unreliable witness becomes the prime suspect.
I was mad. I was confused. I was angry.
A little more than a week after Linda Stein was found brutally murdered, investigators have a suspect in custody. Linda's personal assistant, Natavia Lowry.
She was close to Linda. It was known that she was one of the last people, if not the last person, to see Linda alive.
When police hit her with all of the discrepancies in her story, she got very upset and said she would finally tell them exactly what happened.
But what Natavia tells detectives sounds more like a bad dream than reality.
She started talking about how ninjas came up through the back entrance.
According to Natavia, she and Linda were in the apartment alone when a masked man burst in with a hammer and began attacking them.
Told her they were going to harm her and her family if she said anything, and they killed Miss Stein. It's kind of an unbelievable story. It's tough to take in.
Not only does Natavia's story about a killer ninja appear ridiculous, it's actually impossible because of all of the building's security cameras.
We tried getting detectives into the building unseen by every entrance, and they got picked up on tape at some point in time. It's impossible to get into the building without being caught on tape. We pretty much told us, listen, no ninja came in.
However, their skepticism doesn't stop Natavia from concocting another tall tale.
She said sometimes she would black out, and then she would wake up and be in these crazy rages.
Listen, detectives, it's happened to me once before. It happened in college. I blacked out, and when I woke up, I was told that I was choking my roommate.
So her story became, I didn't do anything to Linda, but if I did, I couldn't really remember because of all of these blackouts that I had.
You probably would have told us earlier on if you blacked out in a medical condition. He says, that didn't happen. You know, it's the first time we're hearing about this.
Faced with murder charges, Natavia decides to try one last version of events. The truth.
There were no ninjas or blackouts this time, but she killed Linda out of self-defense.
Linda Stein, who we all know could be tough on people, was especially tough on her. Not just garden variety tough, but like racist tough. And that she couldn't take it anymore, and that she somehow snapped, and that this was an impulsive act and not a premeditated act.
Natavia writes a signed confession, which she repeats for the district attorney on camera.
I was mad. I was confused. I was angry, paranoid. It was like a feeling like I never had before. It was like, it felt like she was like my worst enemy, you know?
Natavia claimed that Linda lashed out at her that morning, both physically and emotionally.
She said that she felt demeaned by Miss Stein. She was blowing marijuana smoke in her face.
It's like, I don't let her buy my lunch, you know? I buy my lunch, you know? And so she was like, that's the first I hear somebody black saving their money, right? So she's pointing the cane at me now, right? So she just looks crazy right now. Her hand is, you know, going like that. And then she had like her, it's like a wooden baton type thing.
Natavia described the baton as a stick that Linda used to help her with yoga stretches. It was like a cane, but without the handle, and Linda was swinging at her with it.
I sit on the couch. So she's like waving a cane and stuff at me. Then it's like, I don't know, like after that remark and stuff, and you know, her screaming and yelling, I just snatched it from her to my side, took it, and it's like, I just hit her with it.
She said that she snapped, that this was an emotional act because she had been so terribly abused by Linda, because Linda had blown pot smoke in her face, because Linda had made racial remarks against her.
She said she just lost it. She just lost it.
And once Natavia started hitting Linda, she couldn't stop.
And I did it like a couple more times.
On her head. After the first time she fell, and then you continued to hit her on the head with the stick?
Yes.
You know how many times you hit her?
That wasn't myself. I can't count.
The statement that we just taken puts the weapon in our hand, killing Miss Stein.
On November 9th, 2007, 10 days after Linda was murdered, Natavia Lowry is arrested and charged with second-degree murder.
By the time we took her out of the precinct, it was probably like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning.
I thought back to seeing her there at the funeral, standing there in the back, crying.
She wanted to be an actress. She was doing a great job up until a certain point. But we're better.
Coming up, what appears to be an open and shut case is suddenly cast into doubt.
Miss Lowry's confession should have never been obtained that way.
On November 9th, 2007, Natavia Lowry is arraigned for the murder of her employer, 62-year-old celebrity real estate agent Linda Stein. The judge orders her to be held without bail, but Natavia's lawyers have other ideas.
They claimed her confession was taken illegally and therefore should be inadmissible.
Detectives decided to take her statement, regardless of the fact that they knew she was represented by an attorney. Miss Lowry's confession should have never been obtained that way.
So when we sat her down, first thing we did was, do you have a lawyer or not? Because I'm going to read you your Miranda warnings. And I don't want any confusion about if you're represented by a lawyer. Because if you're represented by a lawyer, we can't talk anymore. And she waived her Miranda warnings, and we started interviewing her.
The judge agrees, ruling that Natavia's taped confession could be used during trial. But there was more bad news to come.
That was already a big blow to the defense, but prosecutors got even more when they got a hold of Linda's financial records. A financial forensic analysis revealed a pattern of deception. Natavia had looted tens of thousands of dollars from Linda practically from the day she began working for her.
We know that Natavia stole approximately $30,000 while employed.
Those financial records are admitted into evidence when the trial begins in January of 2010, over 2 years after Linda's murder. Linda's loved ones testify that she voiced her concern to them sometime prior to her death.
She said to me, "What would you do if you found out someone was stealing from you?" So I said, "Well, I would certainly look into it." Then Linda said to me, "I need to talk to this person about what's going on, and be upfront about it," which I felt Linda wouldn't have any problem doing, so.
The prosecution's theory was that Linda actually confronted Natavia about stealing the money, and that was the reason why Natavia killed her.
To convince the jury, prosecutors play the entire 90-minute confession, in which Natavia changes her story several times before describing the murder in detail.
I just snatched it from her. Once I took it, and it's like I just hit her with it.
In the video, Natavia claims Linda provoked her by blowing marijuana smoke in her face. But the autopsy report indicated that was yet another lie.
Toxicology results came back that there was no marijuana in her system.
Prosecutors argued that Natavia's own actions proved that she didn't snap as she claimed. She knew exactly what she was doing and tried to cover it up.
She pulled the sweatshirt over Linda's face, but then she took a phone call and said that Linda wasn't there and would be right back. And then she went to an ATM and took $800 out of Linda's account.
The surveillance video shows Natavia arriving for work just before noon and then leaving at 1:19 p.m. with a full shopping bag. The prosecutor suggests it could have contained the murder weapon, which was never found.
Miss Lowry showed up to work wearing parachute sweatpants. When she left the building, captured on video, she had the same pants on, but the baggy pockets from the parachute pants were no longer there. It was believed that she was wearing her pants inside out.
The implication was that Natavia had Linda's blood on her pants, and that's why she turned them inside out. But as the defense pointed out, they didn't have the pants or any other physical evidence to connect her to the crime.
After a month-long trial, Natavia's fate rests in the hands of the jury. They deliberate for only 5 hours before reaching a verdict.
Natavia Lowry is found guilty, murder, second degree, and the judge gave her 25 to life for the murder and additional time for the larcenies related to it. And she is not eligible for parole until 27 years.
While no verdict or sentence will ever bring our mother, Linda Stein, back to us, we are extremely satisfied with the decision. I'm relieved for society that woman will never be on the street.
It seemed justice had been served. But was Linda's murder an act of revenge by an abused employee, or simply the result of a young woman's greed?
I feel there are really two ways of looking at this case. Either the suspect was seeking revenge because her boss had been so horrible to her, or the suspect had been looking to con her boss all along and was unstable and snapped and ended up killing her.
Trying to get the job done with not enough knowledge of the theft that was going on, trying to dance around it. She almost pulled it off.
I miss my friend. I miss her directness. I mean, I love that about Linda, that she was direct, She was a real New York character, but she was also a very loving person. I was fortunate enough to see that side of her.
He was a beloved professor with a distinguished career.
He was a plant biologist, really doing some interesting work. You could not meet a nicer person.
Until an act of terror turned his university into a battleground.
First thing that went through my mind is, oh no, a student has lost it and is going on a rampage.
The whole world has changed in less than a minute.
And in their search for answers, detectives would uncover a dark history of jealousy and revenge.
It was an ego thing. It was an anger thing. This selfish arrogance, this I'm going to get my way.
It was almost like something from a movie.
February 12, 2010. It's 4 p.m. on a typical Friday afternoon at the Huntsville, Alabama Police Department.
The chief was out of town, and I was doing some paperwork, and we were winding down for the weekend.
Until suddenly, an emergency call puts everyone on high alert.
I did have an arrest that morning, and I had just finished the arrest when I heard the call come out that there was a shooting at the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
The call came from somebody that was in the room. We didn't know the extent of the incident. We didn't know how many people were victims.
Officers from multiple law enforcement agencies immediately converge on the location.
We had the Huntsville Police Department, we had the Sheriff's Department with Madison County, we had the University of Alabama and Huntsville Police Department, we had the FBI, the Alabama State Troopers, all those different agencies responded over there.
We knew when we were dispatched that it was a shooting on the third floor at the Shelby Center.
While paramedics get ready to treat the victims, a SWAT team secures the building and begins a campus-wide search for the shooter.
The most important mission is to go in and stop the threat and get those people medical treatment. But there are a lot of other people in the building. It's close to 200,000 square feet. And we have to clear the building and make sure that there's no other threat in the building.
It was mass chaos. Nobody knew if there was one shooter or multiple shooters.
In a conference room, they find a scene more suited to a battlefield than a place of higher learning.
The chairs had been moved, the tables had been upended. It was chaos inside the room, and of course it was filled with blood.
There were 13 people in that room. You have 3 dead and then 2 extremely seriously injured and then 1 other injured.
The 3 victims are evacuated for treatment. 3 others are already dead. 52-year-old Dr. Gopi Padilla and 2 of his staff, Dr. Adriel Johnson and Dr. Maria Davis.
These were some of the most beloved professors that we had on campus.
Gopi Krishna Padilla was born in Guntur, India.
When he was 25, he moved to the United States to continue his education. He got a doctorate in molecular biology from Louisiana State University.
He was a plant biologist. He was really doing some interesting work.
By 1990, Dr. Padilla's career was taking off. At 33, he'd not only become an assistant professor at Michigan Tech, he was also being scouted by other universities.
In 2002, he accepted an offer at the University of Alabama, Huntsville. It was a big step up for him.
University of Alabama Huntsville is definitely a science and mathematics university. So a lot of engineering, a lot of technical learning going on there.
Gopi was recruited as a chair to the biological sciences department.
Despite his busy schedule, Dr. Padilla still found time to be a loving husband, father, and supportive mentor to his staff.
He would counsel them on personal issues. You really should take time to be with your family. He was really concerned with their personal lives as well as their professional lives. He was more of a coach to them than he was a boss.
You could not meet a nicer person than Gopi, really.
Not long after his arrival, Dr. Padilla helped start a doctoral program in biology at UAH, collaborating with fellow professors Dr. Adriel Johnson and Dr. Maria Ragland Davis.
Adriel used to send students to do research through our program, and over the years used to talk to them about different things. I had actually talked to Maria quite a bit about her helping teach a class in chemical engineering.
They were well-loved, well-educated people teaching future leaders and future stars of our community and of our nation. I mean, they were just good people.
But their plans for the department would never be realized. Now, all three have been killed in a mass shooting, and police are scrambling to locate the gunmen.
The officers form their team and they go in the building to try to locate the threat, to end that threat.
They're trying to get as much information as they can about this person. Who are they? Were they alone? Where are they going? What are they wearing?
Coming up, the survivors name a surprising suspect.
I can't recall another incident anywhere else that's similar. It just never happens like this, and it did.
A shooting at the University of Alabama has left 3 faculty members injured and 3 dead, including the chair of the biology department, Dr. Gopi Padilla. While the survivors are being rushed to the hospital, Huntsville police are conducting a campus-wide search for the gunman.
The assumption when I heard about the shooting was that it was a student who had opened fire, because that's what was happening all over the United States.
Word of the tragedy quickly spreads outside the community.
School shootings are a big deal because they're always shocking and always terrible.
We actually had national news media calling the office because the 911 center was instructed to refer all those calls to the chief's office.
I was just shocked because I knew everybody in that room. I mean, I couldn't believe that this had actually happened.
There were other people in the room that escaped injury, and they did so because of their actions. When they called 911, they actually were able to give a description of her and give her name, Professor Amy Bishop.
Although she was raised in Boston, Massachusetts, Amy's background was somewhat similar to Dr. Padilla.
They're all very smart, very much into academics. Her father was a professor. Her mother was what we would call a city council person. They were affluent in the community.
She had a brother, Seth Bishop, who was about 2 or 3 years younger than she was. They were both into music and quite gifted. She didn't have the social skills, certainly, that her brother had. And so there may have been a little bit of jealousy between the two of them.
Everybody knew the smarts she had. She was a genius. She had a mind like no other.
After high school, Amy attended Northeastern University, where her father taught art. Instead, she decided to major in biology.
She didn't have a lot of friends, but she wound up connecting with a fellow biology major named James Anderson. They dated throughout college and ultimately got married in the summer of 1989.
The thought was that the two of them could never have been successfully married to anybody else, that they sort of completed each other.
As happy as James made her, Amy's ambitions went beyond being a wife and mother.
She grew up with privilege. It was just understood that she's going to go to Harvard and she's going to do certain things.
For Amy, who was just hankering to outdo Seth, when she got into Harvard, that was the grand prize. That was it. Now it could be Dad, Mom, look at me.
By 1993, Amy had not only borne 2 children, she'd also completed a PhD in genetics.
You would think someone that accomplished and that driven would be successful immediately, but that didn't turn out to be the case.
They struggled financially. Even though they were both highly educated, neither one of them really could make a living.
Over the next 10 years, Amy went from one low-paying research job to another, while James tried to freelance as a computer engineer.
He was hoping to successfully discover something that would make him the money that they would need to support the family.
They wind up having 2 more children as well. That's 4 mouths to feed, and they still don't have stable careers.
But all that changed in 2003, when Amy was offered a position at the University of Alabama. It was the change she'd been waiting for.
It is a great school for engineering and the sciences, and this is some place that that drew her in, that was good for her and her field of study.
What the university typically does is give you a period of about 6 years to prove to the university that you have the skill sets to teach, to do research, to be able to attract funding from other sources.
Then you apply for tenure. That would mean essentially a permanent position on that faculty. If you've got tenure, you've got nearly a guaranteed job for the foreseeable future.
The couple moved to Huntsville, and while James cared for the children, Amy began her career as associate professor of biology.
James did part-time work, but nothing that was much of substance. She was the breadwinner and living off her salary at UAH.
She really sank her teeth into that position, and it didn't take her long to stand out.
She had designed this automated culturing process, a petri dish as it were. And the idea there is that if you can automate something that is done normally in the lab, you'll get more consistent results. So I thought that was impressive.
Amy's invention brought more than $1 million of funding to the university and seemed to make her tenure a foregone conclusion.
The students were happy with her. It seemed like she was happy to be here. The atmosphere was good.
So what could have caused a successful biologist and mother of 4 children to turn into a cold-blooded killer?
I don't know what would have prompted that. It seemed like she had everything.
Coming up, the hunt for Amy Bishop comes to an unexpected end.
She had the eyes that were real evil looking.
Huntsville police are conducting a campus-wide search for Professor Amy Bishop after witnesses named her as the gunman in a mass shooting that killed 3 of her colleagues.
They have no idea if Amy has fled the scene already or if she intends to hurt herself or anyone else. All police know at that point is she's wearing a pink shirt and jeans, and she's considered armed and dangerous.
Law enforcement agencies have mobilized to handle multiple scenarios, but the manhunt ends almost as quickly as it began.
All the agencies knew a description of the individual. She had come out of the building and she was engaged in a discussion with the deputy. And Officer Torker realized that this person is identical to the description that we have.
She just looked like a normal, middle-aged woman. She didn't look like she'd murdered anybody. She was just walking normally. We had her at gunpoint, and he told her to get down on her knees. She didn't appear distraught or anything like that. I mean, it's just, she asked me what was going on.
She doesn't have a weapon on her or any signs that she was involved in these shootings. But there are multiple eyewitnesses who says she's the one who did it.
I asked her what her name was, and she said Amy Bishop. At that time, I knew that we had the right person. I went ahead and handcuffed her and led her back to my patrol car.
Just 15 minutes after the 911 call, Amy Bishop is in custody.
She immediately began saying, "This didn't happen. I don't know what y'all are talking about. No, they're still alive."
This didn't happen. There's no way. They're still alive.
As the officers take Amy into custody, her husband James arrives. And when they tell him why his wife is being arrested, he seems confused.
He says Amy asked him to pick her up from work, and he has no idea what's going on.
They arrest him too because they weren't sure if he had something to do with this.
We detained them, both of them, separately, and took them down to the precinct to be interviewed.
Amy and James both deny any involvement in the shooting, but a search of the biology building turns up some damning evidence.
Police find a 9mm handgun and a woman's bloody coat stuffed into a garbage can in a restroom on the 2nd floor. And inside the conference room, they find a bag with a 9mm gun clip in it. They run a background search on the gun, and it turns out it's registered to James Anderson. Any doubts you might have had at that point immediately go away.
Amy is charged with 3 counts of murder and attempted murder. It's unclear whether James is an accomplice or just trying to protect his wife, but police have no choice but to let him go.
We all felt like that he knew a whole lot more than what he was letting on, but we just could not, we just couldn't connect him enough to charge him.
James acts like he has no idea why Amy might have done this, and she's refusing to talk. But her colleagues have plenty to say about her.
When we started looking at the background and trying to figure out what the motive was for what she did, it turns out that she had been struggling for a while.
Colleagues tell police that after her early success, Amy seemed to take career advancement for granted, and it wasn't working out well for her.
She had been there a few years. Things were not going the way she wanted them to go as far as her career there.
She wasn't accomplishing maybe what she needed to for tenure, that the mood sort of started to change. She had several papers that were not probably up to par.
They say Amy's attitude wasn't winning her any friends in the department either.
She was extremely arrogant and that she was better than they were in her own eyes, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
She would introduce herself as, "I'm Dr. Amy Bishop, Harvard educated." And so that was her defining everything about her, was that she was Harvard educated.
In the spring of 2009, after 6 years at the university, Amy's bid for tenure finally arrived.
She had gone on a kind of a political campaign around her colleagues, trying to basically force them into saying whether or not they were going to support her or not.
She was denied.
If you were denied tenure at not the biggest, best-known school in the country, despite your Harvard degree, you're going to scramble to find the next job.
The fact that she didn't get all the recognition that she probably thought she would get because she's a Harvard grad. I can only imagine the anger, the resentment.
Gopi was prepared to help her also go through the process and whatever she needed as she moved on. He was a really nice fellow.
But Amy refused to accept defeat.
She appealed the decision and spent months trying to get the administration to change their mind.
You can almost feel the pressure in her just building. Nobody's going to treat me this way. Nobody treats Amy Bishop this way, and I'm not going to stand for it.
She had gone to a shooting range and practiced, and she was talking to her students about practicing and how much she enjoyed shooting.
By February of 2010, Amy had received notification that her final appeal had been denied.
For Amy Bishop, the jig was up as far as her continued employment at UAH.
It seems plain that she felt aggrieved, and these are the people who had wronged her.
But if Amy wanted payback, why shoot 6 of her coworkers and leave the others unscathed?
I think she had 8 or 9 rounds still in the magazine.
You have to wonder if she was targeting Dr. Gopi and the others were just in the way. Or maybe she just snapped.
Coming up, investigators discover there is more behind the shooting than a simple act of revenge.
It shakes you when your own teacher is capable of such horrendous acts.
Dr. Amy Bishop has been charged with shooting 6 of her colleagues at the University of Alabama, but police are still left with several questions.
It looks like she's been passed over for a promotion and is now looking to get revenge. But they still don't know what happened.
The best evidence we have are the survivors in the room that were there and present. We had eyewitnesses that saw everything.
Witnesses say that around 3 p.m., the biology department gathered for a staff meeting on the 3rd floor of the Shelby Center.
Instead of having a center table, that particular room had 3 tables set up in a U-shaped form.
There were about a dozen faculty members there, and as the chair of the department, Dr. Padilla was sitting right up front.
They were, as I understand it, discussing the curriculum for the next year, and Dr. Bishop walked in after the meeting had started,
Amy took a seat next to Dr. Gopi, multiple people mentioned that she had a bag with her and that she kept it on her lap throughout the whole meeting.
I don't think anybody thought anything unusual about that bag. It was just unusual for her to be there.
Faculty members, to a person, said, we were a little surprised when she showed up at the meeting because we knew she was not going to be there the following semester.
They say Amy remained quiet throughout the meeting, giving no reason for anyone to suspect what was about to happen.
She sat there for probably close to an hour. And then during their agenda, they went from one topic to the next, and everybody kind of looked down to see what was going on.
She got up and she pulled out of her bag a 9mm Ruger, and she started shooting.
Doctors Padilla, Johnson, and Davis were her first targets. They all died instantly.
She was just going around the room, just very calmly, like she knew exactly what she was doing.
As she's shooting everyone, it's chaos, as you can imagine, in the room.
A friend of Amy's, Dr. Deborah Moriarty, tells investigators that she tried to stop her.
Dr. Moriarty was across at least two tables away from Amy Bishop. When the shooting started, she was not in her immediate sight, so she ducked under the table.
She was grabbing at Amy's ankles, trying to get her to fall, to stop. And she kept pleading with her. You know my family. I know your family. Don't do this. You don't have to do this.
But instead of listening to Deborah's pleas, Amy tried to kill her too.
Amy Bishop pointed the gun at her point blank and pulled the trigger. Wouldn't fire.
Just click, click, click. The gun was still jammed. She was still pulling the trigger.
She grabs Amy, pushes her out of the room, locks the door, and then everyone else comes and starts barricading the door behind her. It was as heroic an action as you would ever see.
It was all over within about 40 seconds.
Investigators believe that's when Amy decided to make her escape.
She went to the bathroom, washed off the gun, washed her hands from the blood.
She took off her bloody jacket and stuffed it in the trash.
Put the gun into the trash can.
Then she walks out of there like nothing had even happened.
She called her husband and she says, I'm ready to go. Come get me.
But Amy's colleagues tell police her motive couldn't have been as simple as revenge, because the people she shot were the only ones in the department who supported her.
Dr. Padilla, the department chair, and the others actually supported her tenure. They were in the minority of folks who wanted her to get tenure. These gentle, smart people. A lot of them stuck up for her.
That's what's shocking to me, frankly. To turn against the very people who were going to help her was just... I still have a hard time imagining that right now. It's like, why would you do that?
The magazine was fully loaded, so she had 16 rounds in the gun, and then she had another 15 rounds in a magazine in her purse. So she had 31 rounds for 13 people.
Had it not malfunctioned, who knows what would have gone on.
When investigators dig a little deeper into Amy's background, what they find is disturbing.
We started uncovering many things in her past that just revealed a violent history.
The first thing they come across is an arrest record from Massachusetts, where Amy was living before she took the job at UAH. In 2002, she went out to breakfast with her family and got into an argument with another mother there who apparently took the last booster seat for her kid.
When Amy came in, she demanded that booster seat. She started cursing at this woman, using a lot of profanity, and she slugs the woman and then starts out the door and hits somebody else on the way out. So the police arrest her.
Amy was charged with assault and battery. She pled guilty and was placed on probation. Prosecutors apparently recommended anger management classes.
But that wasn't the only time Amy had resorted to violence.
They come across a report from 1993 when they were still in Chicago. And this time, it's even worse.
Amy was working in a department at Children's Hospital, and she was having trouble getting along with her colleagues.
One of her former professors had given her a bad evaluation, and she had gone and confronted the professor and said, "You better change your evaluation or else." And he said, "I'm sticking by my evaluation."
A few days later, Amy's professor had come home to a mysterious package on his front porch. It turned out to be a pipe bomb.
It didn't go off, thank the Lord, but the interesting thing about the pipe bomb, the powder, the black powder inside of it can only be purchased in one place. They traced it back to one place here in Alabama. So she was a suspect. The evidence was strong enough, but probably not enough to get a conviction in the pipe bombing.
No charges were ever brought against Amy Bishop, but to investigators, a clear pattern is emerging.
This selfish arrogance, this I'm going to get my way, you are not going to interfere with me and my goals and what I want, that certainly was there with her all along.
She was one of those people who just didn't see people as people. They were more objects to be moved around on the chessboard so she could win the game and get what she wanted.
Coming up, a 24-year-old case sheds new light on the mind of a killer.
She got away with it once. Something in her psyche said, "Doesn't matter, I can pick up a gun again."
I believe that she is as evil a person as I've ever seen.
In the days following her arrest, investigators have discovered that Dr. Amy Bishop has a long history of violence. But one crime in particular stands out: a shooting back in 1986.
When Amy was 21 years old, her brother Seth was shot and killed. Turns out, Amy was the one who shot him.
Her brother was 18 at the time, and by all accounts, he was the star of the family, and really the brighter and better one of the two children.
Everybody loved him, and so there may have been a little bit of jealousy.
According to the statement she gave police at the time, Amy had been left alone in her parents' house after an argument.
The father had fussed at both of the children about leaving their things on the floor. Amy had smarted off to him, and she went off to her room.
Her brother apparently went to go get groceries, and then her mother went to ride horses at the stable. Then her father left as well.
Amy said that she'd been scared because the house was broken into the year before, so she decided to take precautions.
She went and got her father's shotgun, and she loaded it.
And it's a pump shotgun. With a pump shotgun, you actually have to rack that round to get it ready to shoot it.
She claimed that it went off by itself. She laid the shotgun on the bed, she wasn't anywhere near it, and it blew a hole into the wall of her bedroom.
A little while later, Amy's mother and her brother returned home.
She went down into the kitchen carrying the shotgun. She said that she didn't know how to unload it, so that's why she was bringing it to him.
Her brother is standing in the kitchen with her mother, and she's got it leveled at him, and they're talking.
They both said, "Be careful, you're going to shoot somebody." And her brother said, "You need to point it up in the air."
Both Amy and her mother would later tell police that the gun went off accidentally.
The next thing she knows, she cuts him in half right in the kitchen with the shotgun.
Amy's mother immediately calls 911, and her father arrives about the same time the paramedics do. But it's already too late.
There's nothing that can be done for him. It destroyed his heart. And so he bled out.
At the time, Massachusetts police ruled his death a tragic accident. But after the shooting in Alabama, investigators in Massachusetts decide to take a second look at the 1986 shooting report.
None of it really makes any sense when you look at guns don't go off unless you pull the trigger. You can accidentally pull the trigger and not mean for it to go off, which could explain the first shot. But she racks the round again before she walked downstairs to accidentally pull the trigger again while it's pointed at her brother.
They began to reopen the investigation, and as prosecutors began to dig into that, they found anomalies in how the case was handled.
They also discover some significant details from that day had been mysteriously left out.
It turns out the shooting didn't happen exactly as it was described. After the gun went off, Amy ran out of the house and into the street.
There was a woman driving by. Amy pointed the shotgun at the driver and wanted to commandeer her car. She says, "My husband is trying to kill me. I need to get away," which, of course, made no sense whatsoever. The woman drove off and called 911.
She runs down to the local Ford dealership where there's a couple of guys working back in the garage, levels the shotgun on them, and says, "I need a car."
Officers responding to the 911 call managed to arrest Amy at the car dealership. But once again, no charges were filed.
Why she wasn't charged with the other incidents that happened on that same day, everybody has asked that question since.
All those things are intentional acts, down to racking around, pulling the trigger, and then taking off and coming up with a story at the Ford dealership. None of it holds water as far as it being an accident.
No matter how she got away with it, Alabama detectives are convinced the shooting gave Amy Bishop a taste for vengeance.
You can see this building over time. She had already killed one person. She could have killed the professor with the pipe bomb. He was just lucky it didn't go off. Amy was a ticking time bomb herself.
Massachusetts police agree. On June 16, 2010, almost 24 years after his death, Amy is indicted for the first-degree murder of Seth Bishop.
People got angry. Why is it that the people that hired her was not aware of this fact?
When she's arrested, she uses the name Anderson, her married name. But when they do the background check on Bishop, they find that she's got a clean slate.
If you've got an amazing credential from an amazing university, you're a woman and a mother, people are much more reluctant to believe you also may be a mass murderer. Unfortunately, our packages sometimes fool us.
Now, Amy Bishop faces 3 murder charges for her colleagues at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and an additional murder charge for her brother's death in Massachusetts. Coming up, Amy's defense strategy gives prosecutors cause for concern.
She had good lawyers. You knew it was going to be a real fight.
There was probably a big part of her that felt like she would beat this.
Dr. Amy Bishop has been charged with murdering her brother Seth after new evidence was unearthed in the 24-year-old case. But first, she will have to stand trial for the February 2010 killing of 3 of her colleagues at the University of Alabama.
If the proposition is, can we prove she did it? It's as strong as you could ever hope for.
We had eyewitnesses in the room that saw her do the shooting. We recovered the gun. We recovered her bloody clothes at the scene. And then we recovered her leaving the scene. So that in itself, you can't get much stronger than that.
In May of 2011, Alabama's district attorney announces plans to seek the death penalty.
If anyone deserved the death penalty, she did. There's no doubt about it.
At her arraignment, Amy's lawyers reveal their strategy to prevent that from happening.
We figured there'd be a long trial. From the outset, her defense team began to sort of lay the groundwork that something was wrong with her.
Amy pled not guilty by reason of insanity, her attorneys arguing she wasn't in control of her actions, so she could not be held responsible for the consequences.
Her disturbance was deep, it was profound, it was a disconnection from reality, a disconnection from other people, and it had gone on for a very long time.
Capital murder defendants in Alabama are generally given court-appointed lawyers, most of them don't have the money to pay for a defense that's going to be elaborate and expensive. She had good lawyers. You knew it was going to be a real fight.
All the while, Amy's husband remains loyal to his wife.
Her husband had been living in that with her for so long, it became in some way normal for him. He didn't think she was crazy because it was his reality.
But prosecutors aren't buying Amy's act.
The thing about a mental defense in our state is you have to be suffering from a severe mental illness, and you have to be suffering so bad that you do not know right from wrong. The pre-planning of I'm going to the shooting range and working on everything, it's hard to say, well, I didn't know right from wrong.
She knew what she was doing. She knew what she did was wrong. She tried to cover it up. She had a plan.
Her trial is scheduled for September 10th, 2012, which gives prosecutors plenty of time to gather additional evidence.
She was held in the jail leading up to the trial of this case, and so there were hours and hours of jail calls, and we listened to a lot of them.
They definitely indicate a woman who is in charge of her faculties.
Make sure you do this with the insurance policy, and you take care of this with the kids. And the person who was just so confused earlier was very much drill sergeant about here's what we do next. A pretty significant contrast.
Their defense would have been dead in the water. We had so much material off those jail phone calls, it was a gold mine.
I think it would have been pretty clear to a jury that she's not legally insane.
But as Amy's trial approaches, the state faces more opposition to the death penalty, this time from the most unlikely place.
We had a meeting with the victims' families, the ones who had lost their loved ones. They came and requested that we not seek the death penalty.
Maybe they decided that she had 4 young children. Maybe that would be too horrible for them as well. They had the compassion.
I got to tell you, I've never encountered that before in my career. There's nobody on the planet who wants the death penalty more than your victim's family. I've never had it any other way until I got to this case.
So instead, the district attorney decides to offer Amy a deal. In exchange for a guilty plea, she'd receive life in prison without the possibility of parole.
She ultimately decided to take the deal, which was not only a good idea as far as she is concerned, but it also gave everyone else closure without having to go through a long and drawn-out trial.
Part of the plea agreement is that you waive all your rights to appeal. And when she pled guilty, she agreed to that.
It was dramatic just because it was sort of the end of the road in this bizarre and tangled and sad case.
Since Amy will be spending the rest of her life in Alabama's Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, authorities in Massachusetts decide not to prosecute her for the murder of Seth Bishop.
I think the fact that she will never get out of prison is a good thing. I think the punishment seems just.
She deserves every second she spends down at Tutwiler, and I don't think that anybody down there cares that she went to Harvard.
A disturbed woman's need for revenge had destroyed several families, including her own, and robbed a university of some of their best and brightest.
When you lose a huge portion of your entire department in one day, it's hard to come back from. This was a huge loss.
2 of the survivors suffered years of post-traumatic stress, blindness in one eye, and brain injury. Since then, one of the survivors has passed away.
I used to wake up someday and says, this could not have happened, but then it did. I knew all the people there, and it just still doesn't make sense to me.
It's the kind of thing that you can't help but remember, but wish you could forget.